Chapter 9:14. After lunch, Li Guangtu sat quietly on the balcony, leisurely making himself a cup of tea and enjoying the scenery outside the window. The air on the open-air balcony was damp and cold. The snow from a few days ago had not completely melted, and the air was filled with obvious moisture. The villa area where he lived had been for some years, and the scenery was average. Only the large garden in the center of the villa area was relatively sincere. His eyes fell on a small number of flowers that were still blooming in the winter in the garden. He was silent, and no one knew what he was thinking. The bell in the living room rang slowly, heavy and steady, marking the time. In the lingering sound of the bell, a mid-priced domestic black car slowly drove into the villa area and stopped in front of the villa where Li Guangtu was. Li Guangtu stood up, slightly lowered his head, and looked down. He was holding a teacup in his hand, and the steam was rising. But he stood there like an illusion. The door of the car was pushed open, and a very vigorous young man glanced around with great vigilance. Then he bent down and quickly opened the door. Chen Fengqing, wrapped in a coat, wearing a hat and sunglasses, almost covering all his features, got out of the car and walked forward quickly. The door of the villa was unlocked. He opened the door and went straight in. The car quietly stopped at the door. Neither the driver, the bodyguard, nor the secretary got out. Li Guangtu glanced down, turned around, put down the teacup, and slowly went downstairs. Chen Fengqing had taken off his coat, hat and sunglasses, and breathed a sigh of relief with a gloomy face. Seeing Li Guangtu come down, a smile appeared on his gloomy face, and his voice was slow. "Sorry to have waited for a long time. There have been a lot of things these days, so the meeting time was delayed until now." "It doesn't matter. My time is not tight." Li Guangtu, who came to Yuzhou alone, shook his head and laughed. "You are the prime minister, but you have to be so careful when meeting. You are really cautious." Chen Fengqing's mouth twitched, and his face was a little cold. He seemed to want to say something, but finally shook his head and put a document in his hand on the tea table in the living room. "It has been a troubled time recently. I don't know how many eyes are staring at me, so I can't be too cautious," he said slowly. "Understandable." Li Guangtu nodded. The matter of Hao Yue Group became more and more serious. Numerous shares were acquired, and the people in the group were in a panic. What was worse was that some inside stories of Hao Yue Group had directly caused an earthquake in the officialdom of several provinces, which had always been regarded as the backyard garden of Prince Group. Not only that, some industries that Hao Yue Group was deeply involved in were constantly exposed to shady deals. Not only Chen Fengqing, but the whole Prince Group was also in a mess. Some other voices inside the Prince Group were getting louder and louder. In some private occasions, a speaker of a province even directly asked someone to stand up and take responsibility in order to reverse the current passive situation. This someone undoubtedly referred to Chen Fengqing. The Hao Yue Group was just one of the breakthroughs. Another breakthrough point was Chen Fengqing's daughter, Chen Lijuan. An investigation team had been stationed in a large state-owned investment group under Chen Lijuan's control the day after her accident. Although it was not a long time, after a thorough investigation, they had found countless jaw-dropping pieces of evidence. In less than 8 years when Chen Lijuan controlled the investment group, the group had lost nearly 1.6 billion. The loss of assets in Jianghu was extremely serious, and a considerable part of it fell into Chen Lijuan's private pocket. Moreover, although she was middle-aged, she was still very charming. Her private life was extremely exaggerated and extravagant. Only in Yuzhou, she had nearly 30 houses and more than 20 lovers. Among Chen Lijuan's 20 lovers, half of them were the leaders of Prince Group, and there were also several rich people, 2 popular male stars, and even a college student. The detailed investigation had been in-depth to the point that it could not be more detailed. The dirty tricks in the account of the investment group and the list of Chen Lijuan's lovers had once again caused significant damage to Prince Group. All the damage accumulated, Chen Fengqing's pressure could be imagined. His status was no longer a matter of stability. If it went on like this, he might immediately be abandoned by Prince Group after the election. If Prince Group could still hold on until then. "Everything you want is in it." Chen Fengqing pushed the materials on the tea table to Li Guangtu and said in a deep voice, "My trump card." Li Guangtu's eyes narrowed slightly. After a moment of silence he asked, "All of them?" "We have no choice," Chen Fengqing said faintly. With His Majesty as a lobbyist, Yuan Lin had a good talk with Li Guangtu in Tiannan. The so-called good talk did not mean that the cooperation was successful, but that Li Guangtu had no possibility of refusing the cooperation. The cooperation between Purgatory of Heaven Capital and Chen Fangqing was a great risk for both parties, because they were plotting Beihai and Emperor Dong's palace. If he failed, needless to say, Chen Fangqing could hardly protect himself. This time, he pushed for the decisive battle in North Sea to fight desperately in a desperate situation. He had put all his chips on the line and had no way out. If he failed, his reputation would be ruined. Li Tianlan and Wang Xianxia would not let him go. He was bound to become a zhongshi. He would inevitably become the most miserable prime minister in the hundreds of years since the founding of Zhongzhou. It could be said that he would really be smashed to pieces. For Purgatory of Heaven Capital, or for Li Guangtu, the price of failure was also hard for him to bear. He participated in the decisive battle in Beihai to kill Li Tianlan. He was the heir of the Li family designated by Li Honghe. There were too many and complicated ties between the Purgatory of Heaven Capital and Emperor Dong's palace. Li Guangtu and Li Tianlan might be pure enemies, but the elders of the Li family in Emperor Dong's palace and some generals of the Purgatory of Heaven Capital would not so easily make up their minds to kill Li Tianlan. If Li Tianlan died, it would be fine. If Li Tianlan did not die, the Purgatory of Heaven Capital and Emperor Dong's palace would completely fall out with each other. There was still a considerable number of people in the Purgatory of Heaven Capital who had not made up their minds. They were still wavering between Li Guangtu and Li Tianlan. Once the two sides fought, the Purgatory of Heaven Capital would risk losing control. The risk of cooperating with Chen Fangqing was great, but the benefits after success were enough to make people crazy. Not to mention Sai City and Mount Shu, which were integrated into Emperor Dong's palace. The Flourishing Age Fund alone was enough to make the strength of the Purgatory of Heaven Capital expand to an incredible level. The annexation of Emperor Dong's palace was completely irresistible for Li Guangtu, and it could even be said to be an overwhelming temptation. So he came to Zhongzhou State with all his trump cards. When he gave all his trump cards to Chen Fangqing, he also asked to see all Chen Fangqing's current trump cards. Knowing each other well, Li Guangtu had a rough assessment of the worst result. As long as this assessment did not exceed his bottom line, and Chen Fangqing's trump cards ensured that he could annex Emperor Dong's palace, then the so-called cooperation was officially established. Neither side had much time to prepare. Chen Fangqing could fall at any time in the storm, and the final battle in North Sea was close at hand. So for the two who needed to make up their minds as soon as possible, all the pleasantries and probing were unnecessary. Going straight to the point was the best choice at the moment. These things can fully prove that as long as we reach an agreement, in the cooperation, as long as you can do what you can, I can do what I can. Chen Fangqing said lightly. Li Guangtu quickly flipped through the information in his hand. The document was not long, and some of the key points had already been marked out. Although it was short, it contained all the hidden cards of a prime minister who was about to step down. Looking at it this way, the document was not too short, but too detailed. Li Guangtu's eyes gradually lit up. He quickly flipped through and said casually, "It's amazing, but if that's all." He thought for a moment and found that he could not figure out whether these trump cards were enough or not. "Not only these but also you." Chen Fangqing looked at him and said in a calm voice, "Both you and His Majesty need my support to achieve your goals. But similarly, after destroying North Sea and Emperor Dong's palace, I also need your support to completely stabilize the situation." Li Guangtu was silent for a long time before he nodded and said, "In this case, there should be no problem. Your Emperor Dong's palace, and his Kunlun city." Chen Fangqing's eyes seemed to be burning with an inextinguishable flame. "My Zhongzhou State." Li Guangtu roughly skimmed through the information and began to read it carefully. He smiled casually and said, "Do you want to completely control us?" "It's the need for balance." Chen Fangqing said seriously, "I have to make one thing clear. If you annex Emperor Dong's palace with my support, then in some aspects, you must abide by my rules, or the rules of Zhongzhou State. I'm not worried about Kunlun City. Although its system is beyond the rules on the surface, it is also the product of survival under the rules. As for Emperor Dong's palace, I don't want and will never allow your Emperor Dong's palace or the Purgatory of Heaven capital to become the second Wang family of Beihai. You can't get the same free power as the Wang family of Beihai. The political power and military power of Tiannan should be in the hands of Zhongzhou State." "It's understandable," Li Guangtu said lightly, but it's hard for me to accept it. In return, the Purgatory of Heaven capital can expand infinitely, and Jianghu State will also give you secret support when necessary. Chen Fengqing said seriously, Jianghu State, you, and His Majesty, I hope to form a real win-win relationship. We can cooperate with each other and check and balance each other. Jianghu State doesn't need cancer. Never. Secret support. Li Guangtu thought for a moment and asked, what kind of support? Everything. Chen Fengqing said lightly, money, intelligence, technology, force, any kind of support. Li Guangtu took a deep look at him. This was the order that Chen Fengqing thought about after winning the final battle. But obviously, he hadn't thought about the specific rules. This meant that after winning the final battle, there was still a lot of room for negotiation. He nodded and directly requested, I need a portion of the elites. What do you want to do? Chen Fengqing frowned. Take back East Island first, the East Island that belongs to me. The East Island that belongs to us. Li Guangtu said lightly. East Island. Chen Fengqing frowned. You've restricted Situ Tsungyue and Wei Kunlun. They can't appear in Beihai, but they will definitely appear in East Island. I need some power. Li Guangtu said calmly. Chen Fengqing thought for a while and finally nodded. Okay. Li Guangtu lowered his head and looked at the information in his hand again. He stood up with a smile and reached out his hand to Chen Fengqing. Happy cooperation. They held each other's hands tightly. There was no probing or even hesitation. When there was no way out, no matter who it was, they would show real decisiveness in the face of an opportunity. Both sides held each other's trump cards. Now, the possibility of betrayal was out of the question. In the face of huge interests, cooperation almost didn't need hesitation. The gloominess on Chen Fengqing's face disappeared little by little, and he seemed to relax a lot. How is the preparation in Beihai going? Li Guangtu asked. Almost done. It will take about 10 days. Chen Fengqing smiled, and his eyes flashed with extremely cold light. He said softly, 10 days later it will be our world. Li Guangtu nodded, and after a moment of silence he said slowly, I remember that Yuan Lin told me in Tiannan that before that, you want to give Li Tianlan a big gift? Chen Fengqing raised his eyebrows. When he was about to speak, there was a sudden knock on the door. The door of the villa was open. Yuan Lin stood in front of the door with a serious face. Come in. Chen Fengqing said in a deep voice. Yuan Lin walked in quickly, holding a photo in his hand. Li Guangtu's eyes narrowed subconsciously, and he didn't say anything. Prime Minister. Yuan Lin walked quickly to Chen Fengqing and whispered, the target has been locked. Where is she? Chen Fengqing's eyes lit up, and his voice was cold. Huiting. Yuan Lin whispered. Chen Fengqing was silent and didn't speak for a while. The other party booked a ticket to Nanyun at 9 o'clock in the evening. If there is no accident, she should want to go directly to Shenyuan City from Nanyun. Yuan Lin said softly, we have investigated the surroundings. It is not a trap. Be cautious. Chen Fengqing's voice was low. Got it. Yuan Lin nodded. Seeing that Chen Fengqing didn't give him any instructions, he took a deep breath and quietly left. He took the photo in his hand and opened the address book. He sent the photo to a number in the address book that he had never contacted. Li Guangtu looked at Yuan Lin's back and suddenly said, be careful, don't miss. Chen Fengqing smiled and was full of confidence. The only invincible realm killer in the dark world now takes action in person. How can he miss? Li Guangtu raised his eyebrows and didn't say much. At the same time, Huiting. In the dark hotel room, Ju, who was sitting quietly and silent, picked up the mobile phone in his hand. A photo appeared on the mobile phone. In the photo, there was a beautiful young woman. She was wearing a beige windbreaker. She had exquisite short hair and a tall figure, revealing half of her pure and enchanting side face. The background of the photo was under the lights at night. The light shone on her, and her posture was fixed in the movement of walking forward. It was a kind of indescribable quiet and hazy, with a sense of nobility and laziness. Ju looked at the photo quietly, and his eyes were extremely hot. It was a kind of naked desire to conquer and possess that a male showed after seeing a perfect female. This photo. This side face. It was the side face of Wang Yuetong, the little princess of the Wang family of Beihai, the daughter of Sword Emperor and the daughter of Dong Huang. Zhu laughed nervously, and his eyes were extremely excited. The phone suddenly rang. Zhu couldn't wait to answer the phone. Your Highness, we have locked on the target. You can take action. A steady voice sounded on the phone. I will look for opportunities. Zhu took a deep breath and was a little impatient. The target will fly directly to Nanyun at 9 o'clock tonight. We don't have much time. The steady voice reminded him. Then let's do it at the airport. Zhu's eyes lit up. Tell me the target's current location. Although he was excited, he didn't forget the most basic tightness. Now he lurked around the target. As the target moved, he could determine whether there were masters around her to protect her. The steady voice gave an extremely detailed address. Zhu nodded and said lightly, I see. Help me prepare a secret place where I won't be disturbed. The voice on the phone hesitated. This is my deal with that person. Zhu licked his lips excitedly. We agreed that I can kill Wang Yuetong, but only if you let me play with her for a few days. His voice trembled slightly with excitement. I haven't played with a real princess yet. Ha 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 ha, this may be my only chance. Don't worry, I won't let her get out of bed alive. Chapter 9:15. The slight buzzing of the machine continued. In the dark but technology-filled hall, the light in the nutrition pod filled the foam in the pod, clearly illuminating the sleeping faces of the injured. Li Tianlan was looking at Dongqing Rushi. Situ Tsongyue was looking at Tribulation. Naylan Shuying, with a little anxiety in her cold eyes, was carefully introducing the physical conditions of Dongqing Rushi and Tribulation. At present, His Highness's body is recovering very well. Well, this so-called well means that his body has begun to heal internally. Theoretically speaking, His Highness's body should be able to wake up, but his brain waves are very low. I have studied His Highness's recent data in detail. Naylan Shuying looked at Tribulation in the nutrition pod and said in a low and hoarse voice, It seems that His Highness doesn't want to wake up. Situ Tsongyue was silent. Li Tianlan turned his eyes and looked at Tribulation in the nutrition pod. He didn't know what to say. Tribulation didn't want to wake up. Even if he woke up, what could he do? His current body was extremely fragile. Although the inside of his body had initially healed, it was still extremely weak, which meant that even if he woke up, he would not be able to move for a long time. He needed to recuperate slowly and even spend the rest of his life in a wheelchair. Unless the third generation of immortality developed by Naylan Shuying came out, it was basically impossible for Tribulation to recover to the peak state. Not to mention the peak state, it was difficult for his body to recover to the standard of ordinary people. These might all be acceptable. But how could he accept Angel's death? Angel's death almost shattered all of Tribulation's perseverance and tenacity in an instant, and shattered his soul. It was better to sink in the darkness forever than to open his eyes and face the meaningless world. Situ Tsongyue was silent for a long time before she whispered, I can't accept it. Naylan Shuying lowered her head slightly, looked at Tribulation in a coma, and said calmly, We still need some time. At present, we are discussing ways to give His Highness mental stimulation. There are about 10 specific ways. We need to eliminate them one by one and determine a way that is the least harmful to His Highness. We can slowly stimulate his spirit and wake him up. Situ Tsongyue nodded silently and said nothing. Naylan Shuying breathed a sigh of relief. As soon as she relaxed, a bright and sharp gaze had enveloped her. An indescribable pressure seemed to fall on her in an instant. Her body stiffened slightly and she lowered her head. He said in a low voice, Your Majesty, how is Rushi? Li Tianlan asked. The corners of Naylan Shuying's mouth twitched, but she didn't speak. She couldn't give a satisfactory answer to Li Tianlan, so she didn't know what to say at all. Tell me the truth, Li Tianlan said lightly. Her situation is the opposite of His Highness Tribulation's to some extent. Miss Dongqing's brainwaves are very chaotic, and her data fluctuates greatly. Sometimes she is very active, but the biggest problem is her body. Naylan Shuying said in a low voice, Her body was completely destroyed by a huge force, and the damage was very serious. According to the information provided by you and Jadepool, I read some data about martial arts in the database of Beihai, which roughly simulated the power of the invincible realm and the physical strength of Miss Dongqing at that time. This data is not very accurate, but it is very useful for reference. Compared with the normal power of the Invincible Realm and the body of the Peak of the Thunder-Shocking Realm, all kinds of data show that the power of the Invincible Realm has caused almost irreparable damage to Miss Dongqing's body. Her recovery process will be very long. Her voice gradually deepened. How long? Li Tianlan asked. It was so long that there was almost no hope. This was what Nalan Shuying said from the bottom of her heart. But she was very clear about the consequences of this sentence. So she was silent for a while, gritted her teeth and whispered, "It will take at least 3 more years. If it doesn't go well, it will take about 5 years." "You mean at most 5 years, Rushi can wake up," Li Tianlan said slowly. He didn't use an interrogative sentence, but a declarative sentence. "Yes." Nalan Shuying gritted her teeth. At present, she was most concerned about the 3 injured people. Tribulation was one of them, but the method of mental stimulation could not determine the time. As for the other 2, one was Dongqing Rushi, and the other was the one from Worry-Free Villa. Both of them were waiting for her results, or the 3rd generation of Immortality Potion. 5 years, this was the bottom line she gave herself. Before this time, she must officially put the 3rd generation of Immortality Potion into clinical use. Li Tianlan took a deep breath and slowly exhaled. 3 to 5 years, he muttered to himself and said softly, "I can wait." His voice was very soft, but it was with unconcealable hope and longing. Nalan Shuying's heart sank slightly, but she still looked calm on the surface. She just bowed slightly to Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan stood where he was, took a deep look at Dongqing Rushi, and suddenly said, "Let's go." He glanced at Situ Tsongyue. His deputy palace master still stood there and did not speak. Li Tianlan nodded and walked into the elevator alone in silence. The elevator went all the way up to the huge and incredible castle hall. Li Tianlan stood in front of the garden in the hall for a while and slowly walked out of the castle. People came and went. The daily life of Emperor Dong's palace was full of the beauty of efficiency. Every staff member of Emperor Dong's palace who passed by Li Tianlan would bow slightly. Li Tianlan responded with a smile, and his originally low mood gradually calmed down. He liked the current atmosphere very much. Perhaps in the eyes of the real big shots, this atmosphere was very messy and noisy. But for him, who had been extremely lonely since he was a child, this was the best atmosphere. The people calling him Your Majesty clearly reminded him, because everything in front of him belonged to him alone. The same huge fountain square in front of the castle was spraying water columns. The water columns gathered in the sky, showing a colorful rainbow under the sun. Li Tianlan passed by the square and sat down casually on the lawn. He looked up at the rainbow where the water columns converged and the huge black sword under the rainbow. His heart was calm and peaceful. A cheerful voice came from behind, accompanied by the crisp sound of a bell. A big golden retriever with a silver bell tied around its neck ran over happily. It squatted beside Li Tianlan and looked up at the rainbow above the square with him. The golden retriever was already very tall. When it squatted down, it was not much shorter than Li Tianlan, who was sitting. It kept adjusting the distance and finally leaned on Li Tianlan, wagging its tail with satisfaction. Li Tianlan smiled and touched its head, as if he had returned to the time when he had traveled with it for 3 years and thousands of miles. Cities, forests, deserts, and polar regions. Heavy rain, flying snow, scorching sun, and strong wind. A man and a dog, very lonely, but not lonely. Those 3 years were the quietest and most focused years in Li Tianlan's heart. Those 3 years had been imprinted in Li Tianlan's heart. It seemed to be enough for the golden retriever to be unforgettable. So when Li Tianlan returned to Tiannan and came to Emperor Dong's palace on the first day, the golden retriever directly stuck to him when it saw him. "When I have time, I'll take you for a walk." Li Tianlan rubbed the golden retriever's head and said in a gentle voice. The golden retriever whimpered, lay down, turned around, and showed its belly to Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan reached out and scratched its belly. He suddenly remembered that she had given him the golden retriever. His movements slowed down, and he sighed softly. "Are you unhappy?" The familiar delicate fragrance filled the air. Qin Weibai, who was wearing a long dress, asked softly. "No." Li Tianlan shook his head. "It's just..." He thought about it and finally smiled. "I don't know how to say it, so I won't say it." Qin Weibai hummed obediently and sat next to Li Tianlan, leaning into his arms naturally. Li Tianlan held her body and did not speak. "How are Rushi and martial uncle?" Qin Weibai asked in a low voice. Li Tianlan was silent for a while, shook his head and said softly, "Rushi's health is very poor. Naylan said it will take at least 3 to 5 years. It's a long time, but it's not unacceptable. As long as she can recover, I can afford to wait." He took a deep breath. "It's just that martial uncle's condition is very bad." Qin Weibai straightened up and looked at Li Tianlan. She had only met Tribulation a few times and was not familiar with him, but it did not mean that she did not care about his state. All the signs showed that, excluding the current Wang Tianzong and Li Tianlan, Tribulation could be said to be the person closest to the Chosen One. This meant that if he could recover, Emperor Dong's palace would truly be invincible in the cutting-edge force. It was not as simple as being at the peak of the invincible realm, or even the so-called half-step Chosen One. He was really only half a step away from that supreme realm, or even a little bit. Tribulation was a killer. An assassin. In that state, if Tribulation hid in the dark, even the real supreme Chosen One would have to face a formidable enemy. If he could recover, Emperor Dong's palace would truly become the strongest force in the dark world. "Naylan means that martial uncle doesn't want to wake up," Li Tianlan whispered, and his eyes were a little dazed. "Actually, I can probably understand," he thought quietly, and the emotional fluctuations in his eyes gradually became intense. "What are you thinking about?" Qin Weibai reached out and smoothed his slightly frowning eyebrows. "Nothing." Li Tianlan smiled and said softly, "If I put myself in your shoes, I'm afraid I don't want to wake up if I lose you. It's probably what it's like to live a life worse than death." He reached out and held Qin Weibai tightly in his arms. "Seeing martial uncle's state, I don't want to admit it, but I'm really scared. I can't understand martial uncle's psychology, but I can roughly imagine how I feel without you by my side. I can't imagine what I'll be like then. Everything in front of me seems to be meaningless." Qin Weibai's body tightened. She lowered her head slightly in Li Tianlan's arms, and her face was a little pale. After a long while she forced a smile and said softly, "I won't leave you." Her voice gradually became lower. "As long as you don't drive me away. I dreamed a few days ago that you didn't want me and wanted me to leave. You were so fierce." Li Tianlan smiled and pinched Qin Weibai's ear, saying softly, "No." Qin Weibai said yes and suddenly changed the topic. "Military counselor has something to report to you." Chapter 9:16. Military counselor was now the chief financial officer of Emperor Dong's palace. This position could be said to be really high-ranking and powerful. His hidden power was not much less than that of the 2 deputy palace masters. It was absolutely not an exaggeration to say that he was under one person and above tens of thousands of people. But Li Tianlan didn't like military counselor. Or rather, he didn't like him very much. Although he brought the Flourishing Age Fund with him, he also brought some huge wealth that had not been exposed outside the Flourishing Age Fund but already belonged to Li Tianlan. But he just didn't like him. No one would like a talent who clearly had enough ability and could even be said to be at his peak but didn't want to assist him. Instead, he wanted to retire all day long. Military counselor was such a person. Not to mention that there was no sign of his personal strength declining. Even if he was now a disabled man who couldn't hold a knife, his experience in the financial world for many years was also a valuable asset. Such a person could be said to be the soul of any force, any consortium, or even any country. But such a person always wanted to retire under Li Tianlan's command. Li Tianlan would be depressed no matter how generous he was. It was obvious that he didn't like military counselor, and military counselor didn't seem to like him very much. So now, although he was the chief financial officer of Emperor Dong's palace, he actually lived a semi-retired life. Li Tianlan needed to find a group of capable and loyal talents in a short time to take over everything of the Flourishing Age Fund. There were now some candidates to control the finance, but there was no one who could replace military counselor. So military counselor was held down by Li Tianlan. Military counselor didn't object to anything. He seemed to have been quietly playing his role. He didn't express the slightest opinion on anything other than finance. Li Tianlan returned to Emperor Dong's palace for a few days. He had seen almost all the people he should see, but he hadn't seen military counselor. They didn't hate each other, but it was true that they tried to reduce the chances of meeting each other. So when he heard Qin Weibai's words, he subconsciously froze. Military counselor? Why not Han Xinyan? Han Xinyan was Han Dongluo's daughter. And now she was Li Tianlan's secretary. If the Samsara Palace had always existed and its economic power had always been hidden, when Han Dongluo retired, Han Xinyan would become the new military counselor, a pure military counselor. Therefore, although she was very young, Li Tianlan had no doubt about her ability under Han Dongluo's training. Although military counselor wanted to retire, he could directly merge the Flourishing Age Fund into Emperor Dong's palace without any tricks, which in itself showed his attitude. Making his daughter Li Tianlan's secretary was also a way out for her, and it was a bright enough road to heaven. Standing by Li Tianlan's side and taking charge of the overall affairs of Emperor Dong's palace, this perspective and this platform was undoubtedly the broadest. In fact, Han Xinyan was the only candidate to replace the military counselor in the future. Of course it's something important. There are a lot of things that he doesn't want his daughter to know. This can be considered a kind of protection. But Xinyan is your secretary now, so she will know some things eventually. Qin Weibai leaned against Li Tianlan, her voice languid. It's unnecessary. Li Tianlan frowned. Since you want to protect her, why did you ask her to be my secretary? Qin Weibai hesitated. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes and pulled Qin Weibai's soft earlobe. Don't move. Qin Weibai's body was a little soft, and she got rid of Li Tianlan's hand. She sighed and said with a smile, Military counselor is very cautious. In the Samsara Palace, he represents the wealth and intelligence of the Samsara Palace. All the operations in the dock are planned and executed by him. Palace Master can give him complete trust in the beginning. In terms of wealth, this is something on the surface, so Han Xinyan will definitely get in touch with this area. But now the Samsara Palace has become Emperor Dong's palace, and you are the Palace Master. He is not sure if you have enough trust in him. He doesn't let Han Xinyan get in touch with things other than the Flourishing Age Fund because he is afraid that you will suspect him and his daughter. This is his protection for his daughter. Even if you want Xinyan to be the new military counselor in the future and let her get in touch with the intelligence system other than the Flourishing Age Fund, and even that saber, such a decision should be made by you. Xinyan will know something only if you agree. If you don't, with military counselor's cautiousness, how can he take the initiative to tell his daughter these things? Li Tianlan was silent for a while. He said softly, in the end, he still doesn't treat me as one of his own. That's normal. Qin Weibai said softly, but you can treat Xinyan as one of your own. Not to mention military counselor. Even I am not sure about your position for Xinyan. Do you want her to become the next military counselor or a pure chief financial officer? As a personal secretary, as long as you want, she can get in touch with a lot of things. What do you think? Li Tianlan asked suddenly. Facing her man, Qin Weibai naturally would not avoid anything. She reached out and touched the golden retriever lying obediently in front of them. She said with a smile, if it's the chief financial officer, Han Xinyan is very qualified. It can even be said that she can replace military counselor now. But if you want her to be the new military counselor, I'm afraid it will take some time to train her. Li Tianlan touched his pocket, took out a cigarette, lit it, took a deep breath, and shook his head. There is no other way. Emperor Dong's palace has a lot of things, but it has always been short of manpower. It is better to train her than to have no candidate. Qin Weibai bit her lower lip and did not speak. In fact, she had a better candidate in mind. If he agreed to join Emperor Dong's palace, he would be more than enough to be Li Tianlan's personal secretary to coordinate the overall situation, military counselor to control the remaining forces of Samsara Palace, or deputy palace master. But now Li Tianlan might not be able to afford it. Flaming Fire. Flaming Fire, who had been with her for a long time, was undoubtedly the most suitable candidate. She smiled and shook her head subconsciously. Flaming Fire and military counselor were the same. If she was willing to come back, military counselor would not want to retire. After all, she could not let go. Let him come over, Li Tianlan said, with Han Xinyan. This was undoubtedly a kind of attitude. Not to military counselor, but to Han Xinyan. Qin Weibai said yes, took out her mobile phone, and sent a message. Li Tianlan held a cigarette and looked down at the golden retriever lying in front of him with squinted eyes. No one knew what he was thinking. Military counselor and Han Xinyan came quickly. Just after smoking a cigarette, the father and daughter appeared in front of Li Tianlan. Your Majesty. Han Xinyan bowed slightly. Military counselor just nodded casually. Li Tianlan glanced at him and asked directly, "What's the matter?" Military counselor hesitated a little and glanced at his daughter beside him. "She is my secretary. There is nothing in Emperor Dong's palace that she can't know. Your caution is meaningless," Li Tianlan said blandly. Military counselor smiled calmly and did not hide his little thoughts at all. Looking at Li Tianlan's eyes, he thought for a moment and said calmly, "Well, Your Majesty, after knowing the termination plan and Your Majesty's attitude, we made some arrangements." Li Tianlan's eyes suddenly focused. He knew who the main target of the termination plan was, so he was completely focused. "You." Military counselor quickly glanced at Qin Weibai out of the corner of his eye. Qin Weibai lowered her head and reached out to gently pull the golden retriever's folded ears. The golden retriever shook its head and tail very happily. "Saint and I," military counselor said calmly. "Tell me the details." Li Tianlan took a deep breath and said blandly. Military counselor took out his mobile phone from his pocket and sent a video. The video was quickly connected. He handed the mobile phone to Li Tianlan and said softly, "It's best for her to talk to you." Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows, took the mobile phone casually, and glanced at the screen. On the screen was a young face. It was a beautiful face that looked extremely pure but had a hint of enchanting charm. Li Tianlan was instantly stunned. He looked at the screen, and his eyes were a little dazed. "Your Majesty, I'm hallucinating." The woman's voice was a little hoarse and sounded extremely sexy. Li Tianlan stared at the face that belonged to Wang Yuetong that he hadn't seen for a long time. The moment he saw her, Li Tianlan was sure that she was not Wang Yuetong. That kind of respect and uneasiness could never appear on Wang Yuetong's face. But this face was too similar, almost exactly the same as Wang Yuetong's. Hallucinating is good at disguise and camouflage, and has reached the top level in this aspect. I'm afraid no one can see the flaws except Miss Yuetong's relatives. Military counselor said softly, "So we made her disguise as Miss Yuetong and played a game." Li Tianlan took a deep breath. "Go on." "Your Majesty, I'm in Huiting." Hallucinating said softly, "We deliberately released the news. What is certain is that as early as a few days ago, someone had already targeted me. But the other party was very cautious and didn't seem to be sure whether it was a trap or not. I have booked a ticket to Nanyun tonight. A few days is enough for them to confirm that there are no masters around me to protect me. My whereabouts to Nanyun are very obvious. They should know that this is their last chance to carry out the final plan, so there should be a big fish on the hook tonight." Li Tianlan gently raised the corner of his mouth with a faint smile. "How big is the fish?" "Probably the invincible realm." Military counselor took over the conversation. "We got the news that the only invincible realm killer in the dark world is now in Jianghu state, even in Huiting." He looked at Li Tianlan and said softly, "Your Majesty, before the final battle in North Sea, maybe we can make the other party lose an invincible realm expert first." Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes and was silent for a while. Then he said lightly, "Prepare the plane, let's go to Huiting." "Okay." As Li Tianlan's secretary, Han Xinyan was the first to speak. In addition, inform the Huiting Parliament that Zhu is in Huiting and his purpose is unknown. Let them find him. Han Xinyan hesitated for a moment and said softly, "Your Majesty." The speaker of Huiting. Of course, Li Tianlan was the speaker of Huiting and one of the leaders of the Prince Group. He nodded casually. "I know, go ahead." Chapter 9:17. The sunlight shone in through the window. On the marble table with several exquisite desserts, there were confidential documents issued by the Parliament of Jianghu State in the past year. The contents of the documents were numerous, including policies of Jianghu State, diplomatic guidelines, internal affairs rectification. All kinds of information were turned into words and printed clearly on the paper. The seemingly soft and petite palm gently stroked the documents in front of her. The places where her jade-like fingers occasionally stopped were basically the key parts of the documents. She sat quietly, with one side of her body facing the sunlight outside the window. Under the light, it was an extremely delicate and dreamy but extremely immature face. The documents were flipped through little by little, and soon they came to the last one. This was a confidential document issued by the Parliament of Jianghu State 3 days ago, which was limited to the leaders at the level of parliamentarians of Jianghu State. The level of parliamentarians of Jianghu State. In the entire Jianghu State, there were no more than 30 parliamentarians. This also meant that even the speakers of most provinces in Jianghu State were not qualified to read this document, which was not very long. The document was not printed but handwritten. President Li Huaqing personally wrote it and signed his own name, which showed the importance of this document. The document was not long, and the central idea was extremely simple. In the name of the president, Li Huaqing asked Jianghu State to maintain absolute stability in all aspects. He hoped that everyone could focus on the overall situation. In the current situation, unity was more important than anything else. The document was repeated more than 1,000 times. However, sensitive words such as stability, unity, and the overall situation were repeated dozens of times. Because of these keywords, the plain document seemed to have a shocking power. In the sunlight, the somewhat blurred but almost perfect immature face gradually tightened. Her brows furrowed little by little. "Uncle Zhong, is something big going to happen?" It was the voice of a young girl. It was clear and cold, but it was incomparably pleasing to the ears. Her voice was neither fast nor slow, with an indescribable calmness and quietness, like a clear spring, clear without any impurities. Opposite the girl, Zhong Yongming, who was reading the written report of his subordinate behind the desk, was slightly stunned, and then smiled. "Why do you ask?" The president has been emphasizing unity, the overall situation, and stability. My teacher once told me that the more something is repeatedly emphasized, the more it shows that this thing is actually very fragile. The girl looked at Zhong Yongming quietly, and her voice was clear and indifferent. "Is the overall situation of Jianghu State very fragile?" Zhong Yongming looked into the girl's eyes and felt that it was ridiculous. As a senior member of parliament in Jianghu State and the speaker of Huiting, he had seen countless people in his life. The girl had a pair of incredibly beautiful eyes, but what made him feel even more ridiculous was the seriousness and confusion in her eyes, as well as the keenness of her mind. The girl had been staying in his house for a few days. Zhong Yongming had never heard of her name before. But this girl, who was as beautiful as the most delicate doll, was accompanied by 4 terrifyingly powerful bodyguards on her first visit to Huiting. 3 were at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm and 1 was a half-step invincible realm expert. In today's dark world, this lineup could even wipe out some medium-sized dark forces. As the girl entered Huiting, he received a call from Gu Xingyun in person. On the phone, Gu Xingyun said that this girl named Gu Xianyan was his student and also his goddaughter. He hoped that Zhong Yongming could take good care of her. For some reason, or perhaps it was the so-called unity, stability, and the overall situation, Zhong Yongming agreed to Gu Xingyun's request and simply handed over the girl and his 4 companions. The bodyguards took them to the director's compound of Huiting. He was the speaker of Huiting and occupied the largest and most luxurious building in the councillor's compound. It was not a problem for a few people to live there. After a few days of interaction, Zhong Yongming roughly understood the current situation of this 15-year-old girl. This trip to Huiting could be said to be Gu Xianyan's first time in the secular world. However, she did not know what she should do. She was like a little girl who was lost about her future. However, unlike the confusion of ordinary people, although she couldn't find her direction for the time being, she was extremely clear-headed. The first person she came into contact with after entering the secular world was the speaker of Huiting. This starting point was not low, so she instinctively seized the opportunity and began to get in touch with some things she could not get in Kunlun City. The confidential documents of the parliament, the institutional structure of Huiting, the military and political structure of Jianghu State, the specific status of Kunlun City in Jianghu State, and the specific meaning of Zhong Yongming, the Jianghu counselor, in Jianghu State. The girl had always maintained an extremely proactive attitude while staying in Zhong Yongming's home. She would often ask Zhong Yongming questions of all kinds, and occasionally, she would see Zhong Yongming receiving guests or subordinates in the study. She almost instinctively absorbed everything that could be absorbed in the strange environment, no matter good or bad. Zhong Yongming had no intention of evaluating Gu Xianyan's various behaviors, but he did not need any so-called intuition. He was now sure that the little girl in front of him would definitely be a very terrible person when she grew up in the future. Because of her behavior in the past few days. Her behavior was very proactive, even with some aggressiveness that she herself was not aware of. But in general, her behavior was not too out of line. Her mind was sharp, her heart was calm, and her instincts were terrible. These might be what made her different. But the most important thing was that Zhong Yongming clearly knew that this girl was different, but he unconsciously lowered his guard against her in the past few days. For example now, he took out all the confidential documents and reviewed some reports from various departments of Huiting in the study, leaving Gu Xianyan to stay here. About 10 minutes later, there would be a conversation between him and the deputy speaker of Huiting. This was a very strange feeling. Zhong Yongming knew that he should not be like this. The other party was indeed just a girl. But she was Gu Xingyun's student and adopted daughter. This identity alone was enough to make Zhong Yongming wary of her. Although the Special Warfare Group and the Prince Group were both in troubled times, and the two groups would work closely together again in the face of difficulties, no matter how reliable the allies were, they were not on the same side after all. Moreover, the girl was different enough. Although she was confused, she had shown a certain degree of maturity. It was impossible for anyone here to be defenseless against her. But Zhong Yongming was not on guard. Maybe there was at the beginning, but it soon disappeared. Zhong Yongming himself did not know when it disappeared. Not only that, the documents he personally brought to the other party even contained some internal decisions of the Prince Group. Zhong Yongming himself could not tell why, but he felt that it was very natural to get along with this little girl. It was like getting along with the younger generation of his family. All his vigilance slowly disappeared in the short time they got along, and finally turned into emotion. He did not know the existence of Gu Xianyan before, but now seeing her, he had a very clear intuition that the girl in front of him would be even more important than Gu Hanshan and Li Qingqing in the future. It's not too serious. Thinking silently, he shook his head subconsciously and lit a cigarette subconsciously. He said subconsciously, "It's true that the interior of Zhongzhou State is not very peaceful. It's mainly our side, well, and my adoptive father's side. We are in a lot of trouble at present. The president. Hey, the president's position has changed now. He demands stability and unity. It seems that he has made up his mind." What determination! Gu Xianyan blinked her eyes. Her eyes were bright and dreamy, as deep as an incomparably gorgeous starry sky. He's going to attack us, right? Prime Minister. Zhong Yongming narrowed his eyes. But it shouldn't be so fast. There is still the decisive battle in Beihai, which is our last hope. But the signal has been clearly expressed in the president's document. Gu Xianyan listened quietly and did not speak. Zhong Yongming said for a while, then suddenly laughed and said, "Little girl, do you understand?" "I don't understand, but I will write it down." Gu Xianyan chuckled, walked to the table, took the pen in Zhong Yongming's hand, took out a piece of white paper and began to record. It looked like a letter. But it was messy. The girl had a good memory. She wrote down some sensitive information that she had come into contact with during this period of time. She didn't care whether it was useful or not. Anyway, someone would filter it. Some internal decisions and discussions of the Prince Group were written down by her. In addition, some things about Kunlun City were also written down by her seriously. She thought and wrote carefully, and the content of the letter became longer and longer. Zhong Yongming chuckled and didn't care. He lowered his head and continued to read the documents. "I've got it. I'm going out to play." After Gu Xianyan finished writing the letter, she put down the pen and ran out of the study happily. Zhong Yongming looked at her back and a doting smile appeared on his face. The young figure trotted all the way downstairs. In the living room downstairs, her two bodyguards were watching TV. She had 4 bodyguards. They worked in 2 shifts 24 hours a day. They protected her all day long. Even in the council compound, they didn't relax their vigilance at all. Seeing Gu Xianyan running down, the 2 bodyguards stood up subconsciously and said respectfully, "Mississippi." Gu Xianyan nodded, found an envelope, put the letter in it, and handed it to one of the bald men. She chuckled and said, "Uncle Ghostfire, there's a letter here that needs to be delivered." "Okay." The bald man didn't hesitate and took the envelope directly. "Where should I deliver it? Do you know the Flourishing Age Fund?" Gu Xianyan blinked. Ghostfire's face didn't change. He thought for a moment and nodded. Yes, send it to the Flourishing Age Fund? No, it's the owner of a dessert shop opposite the Flourishing Age Fund. Gu Xianyan stretched out her finger and gently touched the corner of her soft lips. Tell him that Xiaohua gave it to him. Well, I like the desserts there very much. Buy more for me. Ghost Fire nodded and went out directly. Gu Xianyan watched his back leave, and her eyes flickered slightly. Her eyes became brighter and brighter, but they were extremely quiet and deep like an abyss. Ghost Fire went out the door, started the car, and slowly disappeared. Gu Xianyan smiled and found 2 controllers at the side. She handed one to the bodyguard who had been sitting still at the side and said with a smile, "We're playing games. Sol Dolua, okay?" The bodyguard nodded with a smile and suddenly asked, "Miss, where's Ghost Fire?" "Ah." Gu Xianyan replied casually, "I want to eat dessert. Ask Uncle Ghost Fire to help me buy some." The bodyguard picked up the controller, nodded and replied, "Oh." Chapter 9:18. He met several subordinates, reviewed some documents, made some comments on the next year's development plan of a jurisdiction in Huiting, and transferred some documents to the municipal government. When he was about to finish his work, the phone suddenly rang. Zhong Yongming, who was already thinking about dinner, frowned slightly, thought about it, and answered the phone. "Speaker, it's me, Zhang Yi." On the other side of the phone, a steady voice sounded, speaking at a faster speed. Zhong Yongming narrowed his eyes and said yes. Zhang Yi was one of the councillors of Huiting's parliament. The position of Secretary-General meant that he was Zhong Yongming's absolute confidant. Among the 13 councillors of Huiting, Zhang Yi was the youngest one, but he was extremely capable. Huiting had changed 2 mayors in recent years, but he had a good relationship with the parliament and the municipal government. As the chief steward of the parliament, Zhong Yongming didn't have to worry about trouble in his backyard. "I received a message from the city hall of Shenyuan City." Zhang Ye's voice was low and solemn. "Where?" Zhong Yongming was stunned for a moment and asked subconsciously. "The city hall of Shenyuan City." Zhang Yi said calmly. This was a very official notification. Although Shenyuan City was not comparable to Huiting, its location was special enough. If it was a private message, Emperor Dong's palace could directly contact Zhong Yongming. If it was a semi-official communication, Ning Qianqing, the mayor of Shenyuan City, could also directly contact Zhong Yongming. But now, the city hall directly contacted the Secretary-General of Huiting. Why was it so formal? Zhong Yongming's face darkened for a moment. The knot between him and Li Tianlan was not a secret. In just a few years, Li Tianlan directly rushed from insignificance to the peak of the dark world. It was said that Li Tianlan in Emperor Dong's palace had even become His Majesty. But for Zhong Yongming, the Li Tianlan in his memory always seemed to be the person who knelt by his son's bed and apologized calmly, and then killed his son in the most cruel way in the shortest time. Zhong Yongming couldn't forget this kind of blood feud. Although he had more than one son, he only had one legitimate son, and it was not easy to put the other 2 illegitimate sons in the light. But the son he paid the most attention to was killed by Li Tianlan. Of course he wanted revenge. In the past 2 years, Zhong Yongming had done his best to cooperate with the Prince Group suppression of the Giant Group. The only pity was that he didn't completely crush the Giant Group. Now Li Tianlan was at his peak. No matter how much he hated him, even if he was a senior member of Zhongzhou State, he had to avoid him for the time being. Zhong Yongming did not speak for a long time as he held the phone. In the past 2 years, he had made great efforts to cooperate with the Prince Group, and the most important thing was that he had little to do with Chen Fangqing. The speaker of Huiting was indeed powerful, but he was not satisfied with his current position. He had been operating in secret. He wanted to go further after the election and become a director in the highest position in Zhongzhou State. So far, he seems to be doing pretty well. The only variable was that he didn't know how much loss Li Tianlan's counterattack would bring to the Prince Group. If he could get in touch with Li Tianlan now and show some sincerity. He silently thought that this matter might not bring him any benefits, but at least it wouldn't bring him any harm. When the election was over, he would go further and teach Emperor Dong's palace a lesson. Zhong Yongming took a deep breath. What happened in Shenyuan City? They conveyed the inside information of Emperor Dong's palace to Huiting. Zhang Yi said solemnly, They have enough evidence to show that the only invincible realm killer in the Dark World, Zhu, is in Huiting now. His purpose is unknown. Emperor Dong's palace asked us to conduct a detailed investigation. It is said that His Majesty Li Tianlan. Well, His Highness Li Tianlan is already on his way here. Zhu? Invincible realm? Zhong Yongming's face changed, and he suddenly became cautious. The invincible realm was the peak power in the Dark World. It was the absolute top force in any country. An invincible realm expert meant too many things. It could be huge and unimaginable benefits, or it could be huge and unimaginable losses. An invincible realm expert who did not belong to Jianghu state lurking in Huiting was trouble for anyone. This matter could even be reported to the parliament of Jianghu state. It's an invincible realm killer. Zhang Yi reminded him. This reminder was undoubtedly more deterrent. No matter when, the killer hiding in the dark was the most troublesome. When the killer was still in the invincible realm, he was almost a nightmare. What's his purpose? Zhong Yongming was a little confused and asked subconsciously. Zhang Yi did not say anything. Just as Chen Fangqing could not tell Zhong Yongming about Zhu, Emperor Dong's palace would not tell him Zhu's purpose. It was enough to keep them nervous. Zhong Yongming took a deep breath and lit a cigarette. His expression became very careful. It was not that he was too sensitive, nor did he think too highly of himself. In his opinion, in the whole of Huiting, he was the only one qualified to be the target of an invincible realm killer. The position of Speaker of Huiting was secondary. As a member of Jianghu state, he could be said to be one of the real leaders of Jianghu state. As for other people, an invincible realm killer might not be interested in them. Did he come for him? But why? Was he sick? He rubbed his forehead with a headache and suddenly said, "Is Li Tianlan on his way here?" Zhang Yi hesitated and said, "Yes, they seem to pay a lot of attention to Zhu." Zhong Yongming stood there and was silent for half a minute. Then he suddenly said, "Prepare the car and inform Mayor Wu. Well, inform all the councillors of Huiting. We're going to pick him up." This? Zhang Yi was slightly shocked. Not to mention the blood feud between Zhong Yongming and Li Tianlan. Even if they were very close, this kind of etiquette was too respectful. "Do as I say," Zhong Yongming said in a deep voice. Being afraid of the invincible realm killer was secondary. The most important thing was that he could also take this opportunity to show his sincerity by being close to the strong in the face of unknown danger. If he could reach some tacit understanding with Li Tianlan in this matter, then this matter would undoubtedly be worth it. "Okay, I'll inform them right away." Zhang Yi directly hung up the phone. Zhong Yongming took a deep breath, stood up straight, washed his face, and hung off his beard. A few minutes later, he slowly walked to the living room downstairs in a well-ironed suit, looking energetic and young. The driver and secretary were already waiting outside. Gu Xianyan was sitting in the living room and studying several desserts. Two bodyguards at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm were playing games with controllers. It seemed that they had played for too long and looked a little dull. "Uncle Zhong." Gu Xianyan looked up at him. She smiled sweetly and picked up a piece of colorful cake with her small hand. "Are you going out?" "Yes." Zhong Yongming took the cake and took a bite. Thinking of his purpose, a cold hatred flashed across his eyes, but then he shook his head helplessly and said with a smile, "A big shot is coming to Huiting and I'm going to meet him." "A big shot?" Gu Xianyan blinked her watery and clear eyes. "Is it the president?" Zhong Yongming ate the cake and touched her head with the other hand with a smile. "Not only the president is a big shot. In such a big Jianghu state, there are many big shots. But there shouldn't be many who deserve you to show up in person." Gu Xianyan's smile was sweet and dreamy. "It's different this time." Zhong Yongming gritted his teeth slightly. He obviously did not agree with the title of His Majesty East Emperor, which had gradually spread in the Dark World and tried to be on par with Sword Emperor Wang Tianzong. He smiled sarcastically and said, "This time it's the Palace Lord of Emperor East Palace." "Ah!" Gu Xianyan let out a soft cry. Her bright eyes flashed with a strange light, and she said softly, "His Majesty Li Tianlan?" Zhong Yongming frowned but didn't say anything. Gu Xianyan's eyes turned a little blurred. If there was no accident, the letter she had just written should be opened in the dessert shop and then sent to the chairman's office of the Flourishing Age Fund as soon as possible. But she didn't know if that luck would appear in front of Li Tianlan. That letter, in her opinion, was very important. She thought silently and suddenly said in a clear voice, "Uncle, can I go and have a look?" "What are you going to see?" Zhong Yongming was a little stunned. To see the palace lord of Emperor East Palace. Gu Xianyan was a little longing. "I heard that he is the most legendary figure in the dark world in recent years. I haven't seen him yet." Zhong Yongming looked at her for a while and shook his head with a smile. "Then let's go." Gu Xianyan nodded hard, and two extremely attractive blushes seemed to rise on her small face because of excitement. The delicate and perfect sister who seemed to be not a person of the mortal world let the old man take her into Kunlun City. At that time, the Samsara Palace still existed. Emperor East Palace was still East Emperor Palace. The sister surnamed Qin told her that she was from East Emperor Palace. East Emperor Palace had now become Emperor East Palace. As a member of Emperor East Palace, she had not seen any important figure in the organization. And now she was about to see the most legendary young palace lord. For her, this was simply the mood of a pilgrimage. With 2 bodyguards, she got into the #1 car of Huiting. She looked in the direction of the airport, full of expectation. The directors of Huiting's counselor's compound were all notified. In the afternoon sun, led by Zhong Yongming's #1 car, more than a dozen cars representing the top power of Huiting slowly drove out of the counselor's compound and headed for the airport. Gu Xianyan was a little expectant. In the repressed resentment and killing intent, Zhong Yongming was also a little expectant. As the only invincible realm killer in the dark world today, he was also looking forward to it. A shadow appeared in the crowded airport. The shadow, like a breeze, circled around every corner of the airport at a very fast speed. He walked casually in the airport hall. Looking at the peaceful hall, he chuckled. He secretly checked the flight situation and confirmed the flight to Tiannan at 9 o'clock in the evening and the boarding gate. Out of caution, he quickly checked again. The airport was still peaceful. The area around the boarding gate was the same as usual. Zhu smiled with satisfaction. He had checked the hotel where the target was and even the road when he came. Entering the airport a few hours in advance also made him sure that the environment was safe. This also meant that the sudden appearance of the target was not a trap. If it was not a trap, he could take action. He found a place near the confirmed boarding gate and sat down. The slightly distorted space completely concealed his body. He stretched as if there was no one else around and looked at his watch. There were still a few hours left. The boring waiting was boring. But he was very excited. Because in his heart, the next night would be a very wonderful night. Chapter 9:19. When the urgent phone rang, Chen Fengqing, who was just a little sleepy, opened her eyes in a daze. He lay on the bed in a daze. His mind seemed to still have the vague dream he had when he was half asleep and half awake. The phone kept ringing. He lay there in a daze for a while. When the phone rang for the second time, he finally picked up the call. Yuan Lin's voice sounded on the other end of the phone, hurried and solemn. "Prime Minister, there's news from Huiting." Chen Fengqing's body shook, and his confusion and drowsiness disappeared in an instant. He immediately sat up on the bed, enduring the dizziness in his head, and subconsciously looked at his watch. "Isn't the flight at 9 o'clock in the evening?" He frowned. "You succeeded so quickly? You definitely didn't choose to take action at the airport?" Yuan Lin paused and said, No, it's the news from the Huiting Parliament." His mind seemed to be in a mess. Shenyuan City, no. Emperor Dong's palace has discovered Zhu's whereabouts and even knows his purpose. Li Tianlan is already on his way to Huiting. Huiting's parliament, the city hall of Shenyuan City has informed Huiting's parliament and announced the news of Zhu. Li Tianlan asked Huiting's parliament to investigate Zhu's whereabouts. Chen Fengqing felt a wave of disappointment. He frowned deeply, and his original joy slowly disappeared, replaced by a headache again. He rubbed his forehead hard and said in a hoarse voice, "How did Emperor Dong's palace know about this?" The Terminator plan was still going on. It was just that the elite of the Prince Group had become the killer of the invincible realm. This was carried out in an extremely secretive environment. Apart from Zhu himself, there were only 3 people who knew that Zhu was in Huiting. The person in charge was Chen Fengqing, Yuan Lin, who was in charge of external communication, and the mysterious emperor. Wang Qinglei and even Wang Xiaoyao knew that Zhu was ready to take action. But out of some consideration or vigilance, They did not know that Zhu was now in Huiting. Chen Fengqing himself would not announce anything to the public. His Majesty wouldn't either. Yuan Lin had no reason to betray him. Then how did the news leak out? Yuan Lin was silent for a while before he finally smiled bitterly. I don't know. Chen Fengqing believed that Yuan Lin really did not know. He gripped his phone tightly and looked at the sunset outside the window. No one knew what he was thinking. What did Zhong Yongming say? He suddenly asked. Cooperate. Yuan Lin's tone was calm, without any emotion. Speaker Zhong has given the Special Operations Bureau of Huiting, all the special warfare squads and special forces. The armed police and special police have issued a search order. He doesn't know Zhu's purpose, so he must have misunderstood something. Prime Minister, do you want me to contact Speaker Zhong and give him a hint? The corner of Chen Fengqing's mouth twitched. He stretched out his hand and punched his eyes lightly. He said lightly, no need. Everything will end tonight. Yuan Lin was silent for a few seconds and seemed a little surprised. It will all end tonight. Do you have a different opinion? Chen Fengqing got off the bed, intending to boil some water to make herself a pot of tea. The reason why he had started to rest in the afternoon was to wait for the good news in the evening. Then, he would make a good article based on Wang Yuetong's death and make emergency deployments to start the decisive battle in Beihai in the shortest time. Now that he was awake, he simply did not sleep. Yuan Lin pondered for a moment. I think we should ask Zhu to cancel this action. After all, Li Tianlan is on his way. According to the schedule, he should arrive in Huiting soon before 9 o'clock in the evening. Chen Fengqing paused and asked, it seems that Zhu wants to kill Wang Yuetong? It seems. Yuan Lin pondered the meaning of this word and braced himself. Yes. It's not killing Li Tianlan. Why are you so nervous? Is Wang Yuetong already in the invincible realm? Zhu is an invincible realm killer. Wang Yuetong can't resist it. Zhu will succeed in an instant. Even if he is no match for Li Tianlan, an invincible realm killer who is good at hiding can't escape. Can't he? What are you thinking? Or is this what Zhu himself wants? Such a cowardly invincible realm killer? Chen Fengqing's tone was fast, with obvious dissatisfaction. Yuan Lin paused. For some reason, he always thought of the flying snow floating in front of the Cabinet Public Affairs Office. The flying snow, like a sword, instantly covered Chen Lijuan's body with endless sharpness. At that moment, it seemed that every snowflake in the whole world carried Li Tianlan's will. He opened his mouth and said with a bitter smile, no, Zhu doesn't know about this. Don't tell him. Chen Fengqing said lightly, he has always coveted Wang Yuetong. When he catches Wang Yuetong, he will definitely retreat as soon as possible. Even if Li Tianlan keeps an eye on her and he can't take her away, it won't be difficult to kill her. Yuan Lin gave a muffled Chen Fengqing directly hung up the phone and sat down in the chair. He looked at the setting sun outside the window and waited quietly, motionless. The night swallowed up the fiery afterglow of the setting sun. The sky above Huiting Airport gradually darkened. The bright lights gradually lit up. Zhong Yongming got out of his car and looked along the long runway in front of him all the way to the sky. There was only a corner of the setting sun on the horizon. The faint light illuminated a small part of the sky into orange, quiet and beautiful. The 13 directors of Huiting followed Zhong Yongming out of the car and stood behind him, waiting silently. Everyone's face was extremely solemn. An invincible realm killer was enough to make them, who stood at the peak of power in Huiting, uneasy. Even if the target was not them, how could an invincible realm killer assassinate an ordinary person? As long as the other party succeeded, it almost meant that the situation in Huiting, and even the situation in Zhongzhou State would be turbulent. Such turbulence could never be a good thing for them. Therefore, although the 13 directors had their own standpoints, at least at this moment, when Zhu was lurking in Huiting, they welcomed Li Tianlan, who came specially for Zhu. They were also willing to come to the airport to pick him up. Zhong Yongming looked at the sky in the distance with no expression and waited quietly. Gu Xianyan stood beside him, holding his hand quietly. No one knew what she was thinking. A spot of light appeared in the night sky in the distance. The spot of light shone and became more and more obvious. He's coming. Zhong Yongming's voice was low. Thinking of the mortal enemy who killed his son, he had mixed feelings. Everyone subconsciously straightened their backs. The roar of the engine came from far away in the air. The flashing spot of light dived toward the ground and turned into a huge flying silhouette in the gradually dimming sky. It slowly lowered its altitude, getting lower and lower. Bang! In some dull sounds, the small private plane in the air landed on the ground. The friction of the tires on the runway created tiny sparks. The plane glided on the ground and gradually slowed down. Zhong Yongming subconsciously tightened his body. He could disdain Li Tianlan in his heart and despise the way His Majesty called him. But when he really faced the young man, he did feel great pressure in his heart, although he did not want to admit it. The young man, who was less than 25 years old, was indeed a powerful figure who stood at the peak of Zhongzhou State and the Dark World. He took a deep breath. The plane was getting slower and slower on the runway. Zhong Yongming walked over slowly with the directors of Huiting. The plane stopped, the cabin door opened, and the gangway slowly descended. Zhong Yongming raised his head and stood on the ground, looking up at the direction of the gangway. Gu Xianyan stared at the cabin door, unwilling to do any details. The first thing that rang at the cabin door was a series of bells. It was crisp and sweet. That was the sound made by the bell in the slight shaking. In everyone's sight, a furry and charmingly naive head popped out. Seeing that everyone had been staring at it, it seemed to be startled. It opened its mouth and subconsciously barked, which then turned into a small whimper. It seemed to want to lie down and lower its head to lick its claws. A gust of cold wind suddenly blew across the empty airport. The cold wind blew the hair of the golden retriever in the cabin, rushed out of the cabin, and blew on the 13 directors. Then the sound spread wildly into the distance. A young figure in a black trench coat appeared at the cabin door. It could not be considered a handsome face. It was not a tall figure. He stood quietly at the cabin door, looking in the direction of the cold wind, and narrowing his eyes. At that moment, the figure gave everyone an indescribable feeling. The wind blew into the distance, and his aura became extremely real in an instant. High in the sky, the night, the plane, the lights and the crowd. Everything seemed to have completely disappeared. Or in other words, it completely lost the color it should have. It became blurred, false, and illusory. Only he stood there with the golden retriever, and the reality became the most intense color in the world. He still didn't look handsome or tall, but in a false world, this real figure had a completely indescribable elegance. Holding the dog, he seemed to raise his eyebrows and take a step forward. An invisible wind blew through the night again. His footsteps didn't stop as he walked down the stairs step by step. The invisible wind became sharp, real, and violent. There seemed to be endless sharpness sweeping through the whole world, covering the entire airport in an instant. The two bodyguards at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm near Gu Xianyan trembled violently and almost knelt down directly. In their perception, the extremely sharp sword energy filled every inch of space in the airport, as if it was probing and looking for something. In the airport lobby, Gate 9. In the distance, the invisible sword energy flew directly over with a weak airflow. Wu Ju seemed to be stunned. The next second, he suddenly raised his head in disbelief. The domain of the invincible realm that hid his figure was directly broken in the illusory wind. At that moment, it seemed that the whole world suddenly quieted down. The majestic sword energy seemed to have determined the target in an instant. Li Tianlan walked down the gangway with no expression on his face. Zhong Yongming took a deep breath and forced a smile to greet him. He hesitated for a second and finally decided to address Li Tianlan. "Your Highness." Li Tianlan still moved forward with no expression on his face. His figure took a step on the flat ground. He disappeared in front of everyone in an instant. The chain holding the golden retriever lost its support and fell down. Zhong Yongming was stunned for a moment and subconsciously reached out to catch the chain. In front of the boarding gate, Wu Ju suddenly stood up. The unparalleled danger stimulated his whole body, and his physical instincts seemed to be screaming constantly. Death was approaching quickly. Without any hesitation, his domain kept compressing and hiding his body. He stood up straight on his knees and planned to escape without hesitation. The other party found him. He didn't know who the other party was, but the idea was extremely clear. His body slightly exerted force. In an instant, everyone in the entire airport heard a wild roar that filled the sky and earth. It was an extremely loud sound of wind, but it was extremely sharp and sharp. The tall glass window of the airport was completely broken in an instant. The debris was flying all over the sky. Everyone raised their heads in shock. Everything in front of them seemed to be torn to pieces by an invisible sword. The light was messy and covered everything in the airport. There was crazy surging light everywhere. Li Tianlan's figure appeared in front of Wu Ju in the shining light. He punched. He clenched his fist casually, but the condensed power was like a heavy cannon. In the blink of an eye, the surging sword energy all over the sky seemed to have found a condensing point. Like a monstrous tide, the sword energy and power directly condensed into the clenched fist. The incredible destructive power condensed at one point and burst out completely. The domain of the invincible realm was ridiculous like a piece of paper. The space was completely broken. The fist did not stop at all, smashed all the desperate resistance of Wu Ju, and directly penetrated his chest. His heart was completely shattered under the huge force, and thick blood burst out directly on his back. Wu Ju opened his eyes wide in horror and stared straight ahead. There was nothing in front of him. There was no one. In front of the private plane, Zhong Yongming held the chain in his hand. As soon as he had the feeling of the dog chain in his mind, a bloody palm had reached over and taken the chain. Zhong Yongming stared blankly and couldn't react for a while. Li Tianlan led the dog, expressionless, turned around and walked up the gangway without saying a word. The gangway was closed in the night. Night fell completely. The hatch was closed. The captain of the private plane was already waiting to take off. Zhong Yongming's face became gloomy little by little. He gritted his teeth tightly. For a moment, great humiliation filled his chest, and he couldn't say a word. Gu Xianyan, who was staring at this scene, finally laughed. Her face was very young, but with a touch of beauty that could topple a country. "It's a worthwhile trip." Satisfied, she sighed and said softly. Chapter 9:20. When the cabin door was closed, the sound of breaking and the loud noise of the crowd finally came. Zhong Yongming, whose face was red, was stiff and trembling. The other directors, including the mayor of Huiting, all looked at each other. Everyone had a blank look on their faces. Even the two experts at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm in Kunlun City behind Gu Xianyan were confused. What's wrong? Someone suddenly asked the question in everyone's mind. They did see the young emperor of Emperor Dong's palace just now. In a short time, he walked down the gangway step by step. Everyone was looking at him. It was a matter of a moment. His feet landed on the ground and he took a step forward. Then he turned around and walked back. The cabin door was closed. What's going on? The deputy speaker from the prince group muttered to himself blankly and then became a little angry. Didn't they say they were going to find an invincible realm killer? He came, showed his face, and left without even saying a word? He subconsciously glanced at Zhong Yongming. Then he glanced at Zhou Yu, the mayor of Huiting. Zhou Yu's expression was calm and indifferent, even with a hint of a smile. Born in the North Group, he could rise from the deputy speaker of Northern City to the mayor of Huiting, which was definitely an exceptional promotion. Huiting's status in Zhongzhou State was too special. The position of mayor had always been more valuable than the position of governor of other provinces, more attractive than even the speaker of some backward provinces, and more important than the deputy speaker of Northern City. Coming from the North Group, he could become the mayor of Huiting, which was one of the most successful operations of the North Group, closely following the academics and the Prince Group in the past 2 years. And many people knew very well that Zhou Yu had a close relationship with Han Donglu, the military counselor of Emperor Dong's palace. Now the rumors of the new group were buzzing. When the new group officially appeared, Zhou Yu would inevitably be the backbone of it. This was not an ordinary change. Because everyone knew Zhou Yu's position in the North Group. He was Zhou Yunhai's nephew. To be more precise, if there was no new group, Zhou Yu would be the future successor of the North Group. His entering the new group meant too many things. Zhou Yu's attitude was very proper, without any resentment of being ignored. There was even a little smile in his eyes. He glanced at Zhong Yongming with a playful look. Zhong Yongming gritted his teeth. His extreme anger was mixed with some doubts. He didn't know what Li Tianlan was doing. He was very sure that he had held the golden retriever's chain. So, did Li Tianlan fly all the way here to let her admire his golden retriever instead of looking for trouble? Or did he want him to taste the dog leash? He only showed it to her. So stingy. As his imagination ran wild, he became more and more resentful, and he couldn't help but take a step forward. The sudden voice from the walkie-talkie caused everyone to freeze in place once again. Reporting, the target has been spotted at Gate 9 of the airport lobby. Target spotted. Zhong Yongming hesitated for a moment before picking up the walkie-talkie. What target? The person on the other end of the walkie-talkie suddenly fell into silence, as if surprised by the stupidity of the question. After a pause of 2 seconds, the man said carefully, "Report, the target has been confirmed to be Invincible Realm Killer Jiu. The target has been confirmed dead." A clear voice came from the walkie-talkie to the ears of the 13 directors. Zhong Yongming was stunned and stared at the walkie-talkie in his hand in disbelief. What? Confirmed dead? He muttered to himself and suddenly reacted. He shouted, "How did he die?" His heart was pierced by a punch, and the power shattered the target's internal organs. The killing intent seemed to come from outside the airport lobby, because the moment the huge power appeared, it directly shattered the glass wall of the lobby. The specific cause of death needs to be studied. The voice on the other end of the walkie-talkie finally became a little hesitant. He was an expert arranged by the Huating Parliament to stay in the airport lobby. Although he was far from the invincible realm, the strength of the thundershocking realm also meant that he had a good eye. But now such an old general couldn't determine the cause of death of Jiu? What was going on? It was a mess. It was inexplicable. It was too fake. It was impossible. Messy thoughts popped up in his mind. 1 second, Zhong Yongming's body suddenly stiffened. He tried to recall the scene in that instant. He caught the dog leash that looked ordinary. The golden retriever raised its head and glanced at him innocently. The moment he looked down at the golden retriever's eyes, he saw a palm covered with blood. The palm took the chain from his hand and walked up the gangway silently. So, was it that second just now? In that second, Li Tianlan loosened the iron chain and directly appeared in the airport hall a kilometer away. He smashed the huge glass wall and found a dead end in an instant. He smashed the man's heart with a punch, and then appeared in front of the plane and took over the iron chain. Jiu dead? Was he really dead? Just for a second? Unarmed, a distance of thousands of meters, tens of thousands of tourists. Instantly locked on and killed with one blow? Zhong Yongming's anger disappeared without a trace in an instant. An inexplicable chill enveloped him. He only felt that the world was extremely illusory, and everything just now seemed to be an illusion. How was it possible? Why was it like this? He stood in front of the plane, looked up at the cold fuselage and thought in a trance. How was it possible? Why was it like this? In the lobby of the cabin, blood flowed along the flat floor. He lay there quietly, and the warm wind in the lobby seemed to pour into his chest with an extremely cold temperature. The dazzling light from the ceiling sprinkled down. The panicked roar of the crowd continued to echo. Someone approached and seemed to be saying something. The voice was extremely vague and could not be heard clearly at all. He lay there quietly. He knew that he was dead. But the strong vitality of an invincible realm expert still allowed him to retain a trace of consciousness. He was not sure what had happened. In the blink of an eye, the dense sword intent instantly poured into the lobby and enveloped everyone in the entire airport. The moment the sword energy touched his domain of the invincible realm, his whole body had been completely locked. It was too late to get up and escape. The majestic power surged over from afar in an instant. His domain, his body, his concealment, and everything he was proud of became a joke in the face of the majestic power. Li Tianlan personally took action. The fist smashed all his resistance in an instant. The amazing power in the distance had condensed to one point the moment it pierced his chest, and all of it burst out completely in his chest. His internal organs, all the joints of his body, countless muscles, blood vessels, and even his skin were completely broken under the tremendous power. The sound of the glass wall breaking was so shocking. But the real murder was silent. The killing that crossed a kilometer was quiet and did not even affect anyone nearby. The power of the punch was condensed to the limit and directly acted on him. The seat under him didn't even change. It was Li Tianlan. Insta-kill. Dong Huang. Dark world. He was really going to die. The light in his sight became dimmer and dimmer. The last vitality slowly disappeared, and his consciousness began to sink. He wanted to clench his fist. In his remaining consciousness, fear and resentment had disappeared. Only unwillingness was left. He was the only invincible realm killer in the dark world today. He had established his own force and had a very good start. In the future, he should stand at the peak of the new era of the dark world and make everyone live in fear and shadow. He still had a lot of things to do and a lot of plans to implement. Since he became an invincible realm expert, he had not even really assassinated a powerful figure. But now, he was dead. He was insta-killed by a punch. The strength of the invincible realm had become a joke. Why was it like this? He tried to open his mouth, but the light in front of him was getting dimmer and dimmer, and finally turned into complete darkness. In front of the plane, everyone was still immersed in the shock of Ju's sudden death. The huge shock made everyone unable to organize their words for a while. So they froze in place, like statues. The night became dark. The lights of the airport began to shine. Zhong Yongming finally took another step forward. But all the anger had been completely restrained by him. His tone was calm, but there was an obvious concession. "Your Highness, if possible, I want to talk to you." His voice was not high. But for people like Li Tianlan who were almost inhuman, no matter how low the voice was, as long as he wanted to hear it, he could always hear it. There was silence in the plane. The captain patiently waited for the airport to arrange the route and prepare to return. There seemed to be someone inside reporting something, but it seemed that nothing was reported. 2 minutes later, the cabin door opened again. The gangway fell down. A slim young woman who looked quiet and sweet appeared in front of the cabin door. Every council member of Huiting knew this young woman. She was Han Xinyan, the daughter of Han Donglu. She was also the current chief secretary of Emperor Dong's palace. Zhong Yongming thought that he was not disgraced. He breathed a sigh of relief and subconsciously stepped forward. The next second, his footsteps froze. Han Xinyan's voice sounded when he stepped forward. "Mayor Zhou. His Majesty wants to see you." Zhong Yongming stepped forward with one foot, and the other foot stayed there. He was extremely embarrassed. What made him most embarrassed was that Han Xinyan did not look at him from beginning to end. She looked at Zhou Yu with a gentle smile. Zhou Yu seemed to be a little surprised. But he was more surprised. Among the 13 council members, a deputy mayor who was closer to him was also surprised. Zhou Yu took a deep breath, nodded with a smile, and walked up the gangway without looking at Zhong Yongming. Zhong Yongming's face had turned black. His voice instantly became louder. "Secretary Han." His voice was slow and dignified, with an indescribable power in the night sky. "I also have something to talk to Your Highness." He had always insisted on calling her Your Highness, and it was a little rude to make such a request at this time. The other council members came to their senses and looked at Zhong Yongming in surprise. The council members who were still immersed in the despair of death had only one thought at this time. Does the chairman want to die? Zhou Yu had already walked up the gangway. At the cabin door, Han Xinyan glanced at Zhong Yongming with no expression and said lightly, "His Majesty said he doesn't want to talk to you. Mr. Chairman, please behave yourself." Chapter 921. The interior of the private plane was spacious, but it was not extravagant and luxurious. Every detail was exquisite and comfortable. Zhou Yu walked into the cabin door. Led by Han Xinyan, he passed the rest area and was finally taken to the brightly lit reception area. Soft leather sofas were arranged regularly, and the carpet was as soft as cotton. Soft music was playing in the reception area, and a fruit plate was placed on the crystal tea table in the center of the sofa. When Zhou Yu walked in, Li Tianlan, who was a little pale, was pouring water into the teapot. It was just a simple act of pouring water. He put the tea leaves in the teapot and poured hot water into it. After a while, he poured the water into the cup. There was no technical content at all. But the tea leaves were good, or very good. So as the hot water was poured in, the fragrance of the tea quickly spread. Li Tianlan, who was pale, seemed to feel the footsteps. He raised his head and stood up with a smile. Zhou Yu subconsciously quickened his pace. He passed Han Xinyan and took the initiative to stretch out his hands to Li Tianlan. "Your Majesty." Li Tianlan reached out his hand and shook it tightly with him. He patted him with the other hand and smiled apologetically. "Mayor Zhou, I'm sorry. I thought I was still in Northern City." I just came out of the desert and was so busy. If Xinyan hadn't reminded me just now, I'm afraid we would have missed this meeting. This explanation was detailed and sincere, full of sincerity. Zhou Yu was obviously a little excited. He shook his head harder and said with a smile, "Your Majesty, you don't have to say that. I can totally understand. Emperor Dong's palace and Shenyuan city have been developing very well recently. But there are many things that need your Majesty to worry about." "I'm honored that your Majesty remembers me." Li Tianlan shook his head with a smile. "We're all on the same side. Don't stand on ceremony. Please sit down, Mayor Zhou." "Your Majesty, you can just call me by my name. I'm older than you. If you don't mind, you can call me Old Zhou." Zhou Yu sat down with a smile. Han Xinyan, who was bending over to pour tea, trembled slightly and the tea almost spilled out. "Old Zhou." This form of address was so novel that even Zhou Yu would find it strange if he were to say it himself. At the age of 42, he was one of the youngest governor-general officials in Jianghu state. Only Zhou Yuanshan, Wang Jingxin and a few others could be on par with him. With this position and his age, it was not appropriate to say that he was in the prime of his life. He could be said to be young and promising. It was estimated that Zhou Yu had never heard such a title like Old Zhou since he entered the official career. "It doesn't matter how I address you." Li Tianlan smiled casually and handed a cigarette to Zhou Yu. "No matter what you call me, Brother Zhou is someone I respect. I really hope that Emperor Dong's palace can have more pillars like Brother Zhou, but it seems to be a bit whimsical." These words were undoubtedly flattering to Zhou Yu. But what Zhou Yu cared about and was most excited about was Li Tianlan's description. Pillar. This meaning was clear and unambiguous. What it meant couldn't be more obvious. He took the cigarette, lit it, took a deep breath, and said with a smile, "Speaking of pillars, His Majesty is the biggest one in Emperor Dong's palace. In all aspects, only with His Majesty can we have space to play and enough motivation." Han Xinyan took 2 steps back and watched the conversation curiously. Qin Weibai said that she was now qualified for the job of Chief Financial Officer of Emperor Dong's palace. In terms of professional ability, she had no problem. But in the end, she was just a young woman 1 year older than Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan was very young, but his personal strength and the support behind him were enough to support him to stand at the highest peak and enjoy the scenery. But Han Xinyan didn't think she was qualified. She still had too much to learn. It was easy to be a secretary, but it was extremely difficult to be Emperor Dong's secretary. So she was learning and improving herself all the time. Zhou Yu was undoubtedly a person worth learning from. Li Tianlan observed Li Tianlan's words and actions. He saw Li Tianlan say mushy words in the most normal, natural, and completely sincere manner, and put on a humble posture. He naturally flattered Li Tianlan and changed the topic from a member of Emperor Dong's palace to a member of Emperor Dong's palace. He expressed his loyalty straightforwardly but not abruptly at all. Although the conversation had just begun, both sides seemed to have received satisfactory answers. Han Xinyan stood aside, deep in thought. Li Tianlan was silent for a moment with a cigarette between his fingers. Then he said slowly, "Of course, in some ways, Brother Zhou and I are completely one. Our advance and retreat is one of the most important things for Emperor Dong's palace. We will do our best to help you, give you more support, and give you more room to play. This is also the purpose of my conversation with you this time. In fact, after the funeral, military counselor suggested that I meet you. But there are still many things in Emperor Dong's palace that haven't been straightened out. I don't have a specific and detailed plan, so I naturally can't give Brother Zhou a specific promise. So I want to postpone the meeting. What does Your Majesty need me to do?" There was a slight smile at the corner of Zhou Yu's mouth. Li Tianlan and Emperor Dong's palace would give him the greatest support, which naturally meant that he had to do something. Military Counselor's Flourishing Age Fund had been developing in Jianghu State for many years and had countless tentacles. Money could bring benefits, and the unimaginable amount of money brought an unbreakable covenant. For the North Group, Military Counselor was almost completely tied to them. Zhou Yu was like this. Zhou Yunhai, the current member of the Parliament of Jianghu State and the leader of the North Group, was like this. Xia Qiuling, the only member of Parliament in the North Group, was also like this. The core framework of the establishment of the new group should be composed of Wu Zhengmin and Bai Qingqian. Then some of the remaining forces of the Li family would come closer. And then, part of the forces of the giant group and nearly half of the forces of the North group would automatically become the core of the new group. In this way, the lineup of the new group was already very terrifying. But after the emergence of the new group, if the support of the giant group and the North group was excluded, when the honeymoon period with the Southeast group was over, the power of the new group still seemed a little immature among the several old groups. Li Tianlan would give them support, but not too much. It was not that he didn't want to, but he couldn't care less. He wanted to establish a new group to gain support, not simply to support others. So many things needed to be fought for by himself. Zhou Yu was very clear about this. And from the North group to the new group, it was not a matter of a word or a statement. He also needed to do something to prove his position and consolidate his position in the new group. Li Tianlan glanced at him with a chuckle and asked, "I heard that Zhong Yongming has a strong desire for control? Is he also strict about some things in Huiting's municipal government?" Zhou Yu's eyes flashed and he said with a faint smile, "The speaker does care about the work of the municipal government, but he doesn't intervene in specific things, especially sensitive ones." From another perspective, this sentence also seemed to indicate that Zhong Yongming couldn't intervene in some of the work of the municipal government, especially the sensitive things. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes and glanced at Zhou Yu. Zhou Yu was the mayor, and Zhong Yongming was the speaker. Although Zhong Yongming was one level higher in rank as a member of parliament, in fact, in Huiting's system, the mayor could not be regarded as the speaker's subordinate, but the speaker's partner. Although Zhou Yu's rank was one level lower, he was the successor of the North group, which was enough to make up for some of his disadvantages in rank, so he had the conditions to be a strong mayor. The only thing he lacked was some support. Li Tianlan thought of some secret deployments in Huiting, gently tapped the teacup, and said with a smile, "Brother Zhou, I haven't met Minister Yunhai yet, but I think he has more expectations for me. So does Emperor Dong's palace. The pillar of Emperor Dong's palace should be someone who can control the overall situation. I can't give him a long-term plan, but at least I can set a short-term goal." He paused and smiled. "Huiting is beautiful, I like it very much." Zhou Yu's eyes became extremely hot in an instant. He smiled gently and nodded. "I see." Through the cabin window, he looked at the brilliant lights outside the airport. After a moment of silence he said softly, "I like it here very much too." Li Tianlan nodded. "I'll go to Yuzhou as soon as I finish some things in Tiannan. If possible, I'll give you some support." Zhou Yu's heart suddenly jumped. He took a deep breath and said yes. Joining the new group was not only because the binding of interests between them and military counselor had become unbreakable, but also from the perspective of the North group, the new group had a promising future. Not to mention that Zhou Yunhai had more expectations for him. Even Zhou Yu himself had more expectations for himself. He was already the mayor of Huiting. Further, a senator. Further, a director. In recent years, the declining North group could barely maintain a director's position, and its ranking was getting lower and lower. But the new group was different. The combination of Wu Zhengmin and Bai Qingqian had stabilized the framework of the new group. 5 years later, Zhou Yuanshan of Jianghu had the qualification to soar. Whether it was the new group or the giant group, Zhou Yuanshan would be the #1 figure in Jianghu state that they would promote. Maybe 10 years later, maybe 15 years later. At that time, Emperor Dong's palace would be unparalleled, and it was almost impossible for Zhou Yuanshan to encounter any strong competitors. Although Zhou Yu was a few years older than Zhou Yuanshan, to put it more exaggeratedly, even after 20 years, he was still relatively young and vigorous in his current level. He could completely keep up with Zhou Yuanshan's pace. As long as he could get the approval of Emperor Dong's palace, when Zhou Yuanshan took over, there would inevitably be a position for him among the directors around him. And it would be a position of absolute power. Now the opportunity was in front of him. If he could settle Zhong Yongming in Huiting and satisfy Li Tianlan, then in the future, Li Tianlan would certainly satisfy him. At this moment, his thoughts were the same as Gu Xianyan outside the cabin. This trip was not in vain. Zhou Yu thought of the upcoming decisive battle in Beihai. He thought of a series of possible situations after the decisive battle. This was an opportunity for the new group to expand rapidly. It was also an opportunity for him. Zhou Yu made up his mind. He looked at Li Tianlan and said seriously, "Your Majesty, at the end of the year, I will invite Mayor Ning of Shenyuan City to Huiting for an exchange." Li Tianlan's eyes lit up. Ning Qianqing was the mayor of Shenyuan City. In Shenyuan City without a speaker, the mayor was the top leader, and the chief administrative officer in Shenyuan City was similar to the mayor of Huiting. Normally, only the top leader of Huiting could invite the top leader of Shenyuan City to Huiting for an exchange. This completely showed Zhou Yu's confidence. Very good. He nodded and laughed. The phone suddenly rang. Han Xinyan picked up the phone, walked aside, and whispered, "Hello." Less than a minute after she left, she walked back quickly and stood beside Li Tianlan, a little hesitant. Zhou Yu subconsciously wanted to get up and leave. Li Tianlan waved his hand and said calmly, "There are no outsiders. Just say it." Han Xinyan hesitated a little, nodded and whispered, "Your Majesty, there is news from the sanatorium in Yuzhou." She paused and whispered, "Li Shi just woke up. She wants to meet you." Chapter 922. Within a short period of time after he woke up, the sanatorium was bustling with activity. This sanatorium was the property of the giant group. In the past, it received some retired elderly or wounded people in the group. In more than 2 years, batches of the most advanced medical equipment were continuously sent to the hospital. The hospital was also constantly introducing talents, organizing exchanges, and learning experiences. At present, this sanatorium, which had no specific name and was not open to the public, could be said to be the world's top level in terms of hardware equipment and medical technology. Situ Tsongyue, Wei Kunlun, Gong Sun Qi, Li Wangxing, Tribulation, Dongqing Rushi, Li Shi. All of the people with great backgrounds had stayed here before. 2 years had passed. The wounded people who came out of the chaos that swept the whole dark world left the sanatorium one by one. Tribulation and Dongqing Rushi were transferred to Tiannan. Wei Kunlun still stayed here to hold the fort. But in the sanatorium, Li Shi was the only seriously injured person who was really important and seriously injured. So the whole sanatorium seemed to be in an uproar as soon as she woke up. Wei Kunlun was the first to walk into the ward. Then came the director, the deputy director, the directors, the attending physicians, the head nurse. A group of people came in one after another in a mess. Until he saw Li Shi frowning obviously, Wei Kunlun spoke slowly, motioned several attending physicians to stay, and sent the others out. After some simple examinations, it was confirmed that Li Shi's body was still very weak, but it was normal. At Li Shi's strong request, she took a bath with the help of the nurse and simply ate something light. The doctor brought a bottle for her, which was some medicine that could help her recover quickly. Li Shi was silent and let the doctor do his work. Wei Kunlun stood aside, like a shadow, watching all this quietly. After more than an hour of busy work, when the doctor with a relaxed and optimistic expression left the ward, Li Shi, who seemed to be silent most of the time, finally raised her head and glanced at Wei Kunlun. "Madam, although I know you may know me, I still want to introduce myself. I am Wei Kunlun, the current deputy palace master of Emperor Dong's palace, codenamed Saint." This sentence contained a slow amount of information from beginning to end. Li Shi, who had been in a coma for 2 years, obviously did not wake up, so she was silent for a long time. He called himself Madam. Emperor Dong's palace. Saint. She tried hard to digest the information, but her brain was muddled. It seemed that she had a headache because of thinking. She hesitated and finally asked softly, "Emperor Dong's palace?" "His Majesty Li Tianlan's East Palace." Saint said calmly. "Li Tianlan. Your Majesty." Muttering to herself, she repeated a lot of information that was hard to digest. She had no idea how to react. After some time, she shook her head hard and rubbed her forehead as if she had a headache. How long have I been unconscious?" "A little more than 2 years." Saint sounded calm. 2 years. After a long silence, Li Shi took a deep breath. "Ha!" She let out an inexplicable sigh. No one knew what she was thinking. She subconsciously said, "Li Tianlan is already His Majesty?" Perhaps not many people agree with this title, but I think they will change their minds soon. Wei Kunlun said. Li Shi was still a little confused and said silently, "What about Kunlun City?" "It's in a precarious situation and can't even protect itself." "Madam, do you care about Kunlun City very much?" The term lady again. She had many titles in her life, but it seemed that no one had ever called her that. She glanced at Wei Kunlun. The coldness and indifference before the coma seemed to gradually recover in her, but the recovery was not fast, so she looked a little dull. "You call me lady?" she asked. Kunlun City looked at her silently for a while and laughed. "Otherwise, what should I call you? Or, you don't like this title?" She was silent. Many years ago, when she was in the Li family, she was the young madam. In Kunlun City, she was the madam. In the eyes of others, she was her highness. In the eyes of Gu Xingyun, she also had many titles. Bitch, bitch. She recalled the past scenes and carefully tasted the title lady. It was a very simple title but with a sense of freedom. She thought for a moment. I like it very much. Saint did not call her madam. This title meant her status in Kunlun City. Similarly, for East Palace, it also meant that she was an enemy. Saint did not call her her highness either. Although she was at the peak of the invincible realm, in a very long time, she was destined to be difficult to recover her former strength. There was respect in the title lady, and it also implied that the other party seemed to be free. Lady. She sat quietly and gradually smiled. 2 years of coma had not brought the slightest change to her appearance. That kind of pure beauty was still the same. She was a little weak and haggard. Now she looked extremely delicate and beautiful. Before the master left, he said something beside your bed. He said to you, and I think he said it to me. He said that although he was no longer young, he hoped that you could still have a chance to choose in your life. He hoped that you could let go of the shackles of sin and be truly free to pursue something very beautiful. Master. Saint did not say who he was. But she naturally knew which master he was talking about. Few people in Jianghu state knew that Xianxia, the metaphysics grandmaster who had shocked countless people and even won considerable respect in the Wang family of Beihai, was her biological father. Shi's body slowly softened. She lay on the bed and looked at the ceiling illuminated by the light in the ward. After a long time she whispered, "Where did he go?" "I don't know." Saint was silent for a while. "Although I have no evidence, it seems that all kinds of signs show that after the master left here, he went to the desert prison. At that time, His Majesty Li Tianlan was there, but His Majesty did not see him, and no one saw him come out of the desert. I think the master should have died." "Why?" Shi's voice was a little indifferent. It seemed that because she had experienced too much, her mood was a little numb, and there was no fluctuation in her tone. "I don't know what he did. Maybe he did nothing. Maybe he did a lot of things." Saint shook his head. "But I don't think you will see each other again in the future." "Ha!" With incomparably repressed emotions, Shi laughed softly. "I don't know how to feel," she said softly. "I should be sad, right?" Saint was silent and did not speak. Shi looked at the ceiling for a long time and whispered, "If possible, I hope to see Li Tianlan. His Majesty. Right here, can you ask him to come?" Saint nodded and took out his mobile phone. "I'll report now." Chapter 923. After the phone call, Saint did not say anything more. He just said that His Majesty was in Huiting and would come over soon. Then he left Shi's ward. With Shi's awakening, whether she would leave or stay was not what Saint cared about the most. After sitting in the sanatorium for nearly 2 years, he was a little tired of it. With Shi's awakening, his task was almost completed. The deputy palace lord of Emperor Dong's palace was in charge of Tiannan. He took some time to complete the handover with the military counselor. With the military counselor's assistance, he was in charge of the intelligence and secret forces of Emperor Dong's palace. This was the future he was looking forward to more than staying in the sanatorium. He walked out of the ward and closed the door. The moment the door closed, he peeked into the ward through the gap. In his sight, Shi sat up, reached out to hold her knees, and quietly looked at the night outside the window. No one knew what she was thinking. Saint shook his head and smiled. The door closed, and the whole world seemed to become quiet. The night outside the window was quiet and deep. Although it was cold in winter, there was no wind, frost, rain, or snow tonight. The street lights in the sanatorium were lit, blending with the moonlight and reflecting light in the night. It was quiet, gentle, and spacious. Everything in his line of sight was like an oil painting that had been completely frozen in darkness. It was slightly heavy, yet it carried a wisp of indescribable lightness. Li Shi sat on the bed in a daze, looking out of the window. It seemed that she had not completely woken up from the coma of more than 2 years. She was a little confused, and there seemed to be 2 personalities in her mind. One was recalling in a mess, while the other was thinking in a daze. The pictures of the first decades of her life kept flashing in her mind. They were not in a coherent world but were unconstrained. They were about her father, her daughter, Kunlun City, the Li family. Countless scenes, countless smiling faces, and countless mockery. Wind and rain, ups and downs. Perhaps they were all very interesting stories. There were those who endured humiliation, those who were overcome with emotion, those who were at a loss, those who were in high spirits, and those who were completely disheartened. The images that flashed in his mind began to arrange themselves in order. Li Shi thought quietly, recalling her life. She did not lose her memory, but she remembered many things. In her memories, she looked at the people who played an important role in her life, but she could not find her place. Muddle-headed, a walking corpse. What have I been doing all these years? Or what did he do? The past was like the wind, but the memories were like the tide. Her thoughts had only just begun, and the endless past had already completely drowned her in the next moment. She saw Gu Xingyun and the Gu clan who had endured in the past. He saw the arrogant Li Guangtu of the past. He saw Wang Tianzong, who used to be silent and a little dull. He saw Li Honghe, who stood at the peak and protected Jianghu state and the Li family wholeheartedly. Every single one of them was vivid in his memory. Everyone has a meaning. What about himself? He had lived for more than 50 years. Apart from becoming a tool used by others to achieve some conspiracy, what meaning did his life have? Perhaps the answer to this question had already been found after the case of treason. More than 20 years passed quickly. Until today, Li Shi finally determined that the only meaning of her life might be to pierce the man's chest with her sword. Countless laughter, happiness, longing, expectations, and promises had all turned into bubbles along with that sword strike. Fresh blood flowed down from the blade. He collapsed, laughing wildly. Everything after that, until now, was a paleness that she did not want to recall. Li Shi took a breath gently. She seemed to feel a little cold, and subconsciously held herself tighter. Your emotions are a little confused. She didn't know how much time had passed. In the extremely quiet room, an indifferent voice suddenly sounded in Li Shi's ears. Li Shi, who had been completely immersed in her memories, suddenly shook and raised her head subconsciously. Li Tianlan stood by the bed and looked into her eyes. His expression was calm. How do you feel? Li Shi looked at him in a daze. After a while she shook her head and said, I'm fine, but not very good. It will take some time. Li Tianlan nodded and did not choose to sit down. He just said in a calm voice, Go ahead. He stood by the bed, motionless. The black windbreaker wrapped his body, and the complicated golden lines on the windbreaker shone softly and slightly under the light, but every ray of light was like the sharpest sword light. Li Shi quietly felt the aura, laughed at herself and whispered, I know the East Emperor Palace, but the East Emperor Palace has become the East Emperor Palace. Now you are really qualified to be called Your Majesty. Li Tianlan did not speak. How is she? After a moment of silence, Li Shi continued to ask. This question was a bit abrupt. But Li Tianlan could basically be sure who she was talking about. Li Tianlan's mouth twitched. You care. Li Shi hugged her body tightly and leaned against the corner of the wall. Such a posture might look a little delicate and pitiful on others, but on her, it was a kind of lifeless sadness. Do you want to say that I don't deserve it? Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes. His expression was still calm, but his voice became a little cold and hard. She will be fine. Thank you. Li Shi whispered. No, forget it. Li Tianlan nodded. If there's nothing else, I'm leaving. I thought you would have something to ask me. Li Shi laughed at herself again. Do you already know or ask you what? Li Tianlan looked at Li Shi quietly. Ask if you are my mother? Li Shi's palms suddenly clenched, and she seemed a little nervous. Am I? What do you think? Li Tianlan laughed. Li Shi stared at Li Tianlan's eyes in silence. There was a smile in her eyes, but there was no emotion in her smile. Yes and no, she whispered. Li Tianlan nodded and said yes. When did you know? Li Shi asked. After the chaos was over. When I returned to Yuzhou, I asked a lot of people about Mormons, but it doesn't matter. I don't know anything, and I don't want to know. It doesn't matter. Escape. Li Shi's eyes were a little deep. Refuse to forgive them or... You think too much. Li Tianlan smiled. I don't hate anyone, let alone forgive them. I don't want to know, and they don't seem to want me to know. Things have come to this point, but there is no need to point it out. It's good to know. I have suffered a lot since I was a child, but Grandpa is very good to me. I have no resentment in my heart. Not at all. Moreover, some things don't need to be changed. Whether my surname is Li or Dongqing. He was silent for a while and said faintly, We are all together. We are all a family. What's the difference? Li Shi lowered her head silently. Li Tianlan waited for a while. Just when he wanted to leave again, Li Shi spoke, but it was a topic that had nothing to do with his life experience. In fact, I think I really liked Gu Xingyun, even loved him. She said softly, and her voice was like a dream. Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows. So maybe I'm really a fickle woman. My father wanted to be in power at that time. Things like fate really exist. He could see the strong fate of the Gu family at that time. According to him later, even if there was no treason case, the Li family was doomed to fall. So in the days when the Gu family was humble, I was sent to Kunlun City by him. At that time, Gu Xingyun was not like now. She thought for a while and suddenly found that she had no specific impression of Gu Xingyun over the years. She couldn't help laughing again. At that time he was very simple. Although he had some ambitions, they were in the ordinary category. He didn't have so many resentments later. I think he also liked me at that time. He liked me very much, but later, I appeared beside Li Guangtu. At that time, Li Guangtu didn't have to get me. He just met me occasionally in the Gu family and said I was beautiful with a smile. He didn't even ask my name. But at that time, the Gu family was a dog lying under the Zhuanyuantai, wagging its tail and begging for pity. So that night, I was sent to Li Guangtu's home by Gu Dongqing. Naturally that night, I went to Li Guangtu's bed. Although I was reluctant, I couldn't resist. Gu Xingyun resisted, but one of his arms and one of his legs was broken. At that time, Gu Dongqing told me to serve Li Guangtu well and make him satisfied. Otherwise, he would make Gu Xingyun's life worse than death. Li Tianlan did not speak. He had no impression of Gu Dongqing, but he seemed to have heard of the name. He was the former patriarch of the Gu family and Gu Qianchuan's uncle. When he was the patriarch, Gu Xingyun's branch was not outstanding, and Gu Qianchuan's branch was the orthodox of the Gu family. Li Tianlan thought of the information he got from the Lu family in Huiting and the Heshabi, and his imagination ran wild. Li Shi said unhurriedly, At that time, although I was with Gu Xingyun, my body was very clean. Li Guangtu looked very satisfied, as if he had got a new toy. At that time, I could be said to have used all my skills to tie him to me. About 4 months later, I walked into Li Guangtu's circle of friends at that time and met Wang Tianzong, Lin Fengting, and Summer Solstice. A year later, I met Li Honghe, the god of war of Zhongzhou state at that time. The day after I met Li Honghe, I returned to the Gu family by myself. You can't imagine how I felt when Gu Dongqing, who used to be superior to me, bowed to me. I met Gu Xingyun. Gu Dongqing was indeed a good dog. He was afraid that something would happen between me and Gu Xingyun, so he kept a close eye on us throughout the meeting. I made a request to them. I could stay in the Li family, but the Gu family must do their best to cultivate Gu Xingyun. Stay in the Li family. Li Tianlan's tone was inexplicable. I did stay in the Li family. You may not believe it. Li Shi smiled. Her voice was a little sarcastic. Gu Dongqing is really a good dog. He not only wagged his tail and begged for mercy to the Li family, but also had an almost abnormal loyalty. You haven't heard that loyalty is loyalty. At that time, Li Guangtu just said that I was beautiful, and he could send me over that night. If Li Guangtu didn't mean me at that time, but his daughter or his wife, Gu Dongqing could also send them over. In those years, when I stayed with Li Guangtu, her only requirement for me was to serve Li Guangtu well and take care of his daily life. She didn't have any other requirements. The day after I met Senior Li, he could bow to me. Not only me, but you should know that at that time, Situ Tsungyue and Yun Qinshi, the current Phantom Swordmaster of Mount Shu, were also Li Guangtu's women. Gu Dongqing was already an invincible realm expert at that time. When he saw them, who were still young, he would also bow to them. In the eyes of others, it was servility. But for the Li family, this kind of loyalty was undoubtedly what the father and son of the Li family liked. So at that time, they almost completely trusted the Gu family. Go on. No one knew what Li Tianlan was thinking about, but he said quietly. In those years, I had been with Li Guangtu. Occasionally, I went to the Gu family and met Gu Xingyun. What happened later? She shook her head and recalled quietly. After Gu Dongqing died and Gu Qingfeng became the patriarch of the Gu family, everything changed. Chapter 924. Li Tianlan was no stranger to the name Gu Qingfeng. He was the patriarch of the Gu clan before Gu Xingyun, the father of Gu Qianquan. It was he who got the imperial jade seal in Heshabi, but he was killed by Lu Tianqing of the Lu family in Huiting. Lu Tianqing barely entered the invincible realm in the process of exploring the imperial jade seal. Finally, more than 10 years ago, he fought with Situ Tsungyue in Taibai Mountain. Lu Tianqing was defeated and died. Sai City rose, and the status of the Lu family plummeted. In the end, when facing Li Tianlan, in order to protect himself, he gave the imperial jade seal to him, and he gave the imperial jade seal to Tribulation. Surrounded by an indescribable emotion, Li Tianlan reached out and touched his chin. Gu Qingfeng is disloyal to the Li family? It's not just unfaithful. Li Shi shook her head. It's hatred and resentment. In fact, in the eyes of outsiders, that kind of emotion is normal. Not everyone is willing to be a dog. Although the Li family treated them well, a dog is a dog. Even if they had to stand and eat the leftovers, not many people would be willing to eat meat while kneeling. Li Tianlan looked at Li Shi and asked calmly, "What does Gu Qingfeng want you to do?" Speaking of the past with this mentality, Li Shi's heart was calm and almost numb. He tried to let me control Li Guangtu. Control was a very comprehensive word. Controlling Li Guangtu's whereabouts, controlling some of his plans, controlling some information, influencing his stance. For the Gu family, which was attached to the Li family at that time, if Li Shi could do all this, the benefits to the Gu family were self-evident. You actually agreed. Li Tianlan said. Naturally, I won't agree to Gu Qingfeng's request. Li Shi was expressionless. At that time, I was very good with Li Guangtu. He really doted on me. The reason why Situ Tsungyue and Yun Qinshi didn't like me was also because he doted on me. I was with him all year round. Many people in the Li family had begun to call me young madam. Li Guangtu even wanted to marry me. I was the woman that Gu Dongqing gave to Li Guangtu. His purpose was very pure. He wasn't afraid of Gu Qingfeng threatening me. Moreover, he didn't dare to threaten me. At that time, I was almost out of the control of the Gu family. So, Li Tianlan understood. Is it Gu Xingyun? Li Shi was silent for a long time before she said, yes. I'm not sure whether Gu Dongqing's death had anything to do with Gu Xingyun, but it's obvious that he hated Gu Chongqing for giving me to Li Guangtu. Similarly, he hated the Li family as much as he hated Gu Dongqing. Li Shi lowered her head. As Gu Dongqing's goddaughter, I attended his funeral. On the day of the funeral, I saw Gu Xingyun. At that time, he wanted to touch me, but I didn't agree. I don't know whether I was afraid or unwilling. Even now, I don't know my mood at that time. Gu Xingyun was very angry at that time. He said that he would destroy the Li family and kill Li Guangtu completely. He said that I was his and said a lot. He hoped that I could help him. And then you began to betray everything about Li Guangtu? Li Tianlan asked. This time, Li Shi hesitated for a longer time. She seemed to be recalling something, but there was some confusion in her eyes. After a long time she whispered, I don't know. Not sure? Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows. I don't remember. Li Shi whispered, I still remember all the details of besieging Li Guangtu that year, but it was only that battle. Before that, I don't know whether I had betrayed Li Guangtu or the Li family. She frowned tightly, and there was an unconcealable pain in her cold and indifferent eyes. No, I should have done it once. At that time, Senior Li and Li Guangtu had a fierce fight. At that time, he had just entered the invincible realm. The old patriarch of Beihai died. It seemed that because of this, Senior Li told him not to set his eyes on the Wang family of Beihai. She frowned tightly and looked more and more painful. Li Guangtu. At that time, he said that the Wang family of Beihai was no longer worthy of their status, and this was an opportunity for the Li family. Senior Li said that the Li family couldn't do it either. It seemed that there was something inside Beihai. At that time, the Li family couldn't stop it at all. Li Guangtu said that he wanted to see it. I don't remember. Later, I should have told this news to Gu Xingyun. I seem to remember this thing. But I don't remember doing it. She remembered that she had told this news to Gu Xingyun, but she didn't remember doing it herself. Such a contradictory sentence made Li Tianlan's eyes become extremely deep in an instant. Li Shi shook her head fiercely and glanced at Li Tianlan. You should know what's going on. You've been hypnotized. Li Tianlan said calmly. Or at least someone has secretly imposed a very serious psychological suggestion on you. It can make you do something in a sober state, but it won't let you remember what you have done. Obviously, there is at least one real master in the spiritual field in Kunlun City, and it is very likely that it is Gu Xingyun himself. Li Tianlan twitched the corner of his mouth and whispered, It's really deep to hide. Maybe. Li Shi murmured to herself. In fact, at that time, the Gu family had already secretly planned to take action against Li Guangtu, but it was just a plan, and there was no breakthrough. However, after knowing Li Guangtu's ambition, the Gu family confirmed the plan and let some hidden pawns take action to provoke the relationship between the Li family and the Wang family of Beihai. During that time, Senior Li was very busy. Li Guangtu was arrogant and disdained to explain those provocations on the surface. Sometimes, in order to test the attitude of some forces of the Li family in the Southeast Group, he even chose to acquiesce. The plan went very smoothly. Before they were sure to take action, Summer Solstice took the initiative to find Gu Xingyun. Gu Xingyun and several invincible realm experts took dozens of thunder-shocking realm experts to besiege Li Guangtu. Summer Solstice took action at the most appropriate time. When the murderous weapon of the Li family was about to fire, she destroyed the infinite sky and seriously injured Li Guangtu. That sneak attack could be said to be a lose-lose situation. Summer Solstice's injury has not even healed yet, and Li Guangtu, who was also seriously injured, was completely crazy at that time. In fact, with his strength at that time, if he wanted to escape, he had a chance, but he lost his mind and completely wanted to take everyone with him. Li Shi smiled bitterly. So I appeared in front of him and pierced his heart with a sword. I remember all the scenes of that battle very clearly. The Gu family stole my newborn child and threatened me with the lives of the child and my father to kill Li Guangtu. I was really shaken at that time. Maybe the Gu family magnified the psychological suggestion in my heart at the moment I was shaken and gave me enough reasons. In fact, when I took that sword, I regretted it. When I was in the air, I cried. Li Guangtu also saw me and hesitated for a moment. In less than a second, the treason case happened, and the Li family ended. The Gu family stole your child? Li Tianlan asked. It's my daughter. Li Shi's eyes were a little dazed. My daughter and Li Guangtu's were in the Yuzhou military headquarters hospital at that time. It was the hospital with the best conditions at that time. In terms of obstetrics and gynecology, there were more authoritative doctors. She raised her head and took a deep look at Li Guangtu. So, at that time, many pregnant women with status would choose to give birth there. I was like this. She hesitated for a moment and said in a voice without any emotion, So was Bai Qingqian. Li Tianlan was expressionless and did not move. The situation at that time was actually very tense. A few days after the treason case, Senior Li left Yuzhou and went to Beihai. At that time, the Li family and Beihai had almost completely turned against each other. Senior Li seemed to want to save something. I was a pregnant woman, and there were not many people taking care of me. They were several female experts of the Li family. At that time, no one thought that there would be any problem. After all, the Li family had not fallen yet. Who dared to hurt me? But the accident happened. Gu Xingyun sneaked into the hospital in person. At that time, he thought that there were no big shots in the hospital. No one could find him. Oh, no one found him at that time, but there were still big shots. At that time, Dongqing Hongguang, the minister of the military headquarters, was in the hospital. Because on the same day that I gave birth to my daughter, Bai Qingqian also gave birth to a son for the Dongqing family. They were born on the same day in the same month of the same year. Li Tianlan took a deep breath and did not speak. I was a little weak after delivery. Because of the anesthesia, it was difficult for me to move, so I was not very clear about a lot of things. But in the process of cleaning up after the baby was born, it was said that a soldier rushed in directly, laughed and called him godson, and took my daughter away. When the nurse found out that she had taken the wrong person and chased out, Gu Xingyun walked in. At that time, there were two babies, a boy and a girl in the room. One was a child of the Dongqing family, and the other. Li Shi smiled. He knew that I gave birth to a daughter, so he didn't touch the boy, but took away the girl who was also just born and me. When the Dongqing family found out that the soldier had taken the wrong child and took the child that really belonged to their family back, they found that the mother of the girl they had been holding, that is me, had disappeared. Li Tianlan's mouth twitched, and he said in a low voice, "Who was the person who took your daughter out at that time?" "Thunder God of the Dongqing family," Li Shi said. Li Tianlan remembered Thunder God, who had accompanied him in the desert prison for more than a year, and he didn't know what to say for a while. Later, the treason case broke out. The Dongqing family didn't give the child to Li Honghe until he came back. But I don't know why the granddaughter of the Li family became the grandson, and the grandson of the Dongqing family became the granddaughter. She looked up at Li Tianlan and suddenly said, "Do you think it was intentional or unintentional?" I heard that soon after, Bai Qingqian and Dongqing Wudi completely fell out. Although they didn't divorce, they basically broke up with the Dongqing family. They haven't returned to the Dongqing family for nearly 20 years. It wasn't until you appeared that they got back together. Li Tianlan stared at her silently. After a long while he said, "Oh." His expression was calm, and his tone was neither salty nor light. "You really don't care about these things." Li Shi smiled. "It doesn't make any sense," Li Tianlan said calmly. "Maybe." Li Shi answered absent-mindedly. "After the case of treason, they forced me to kill the child who was mistakenly adopted. You probably know what happened next. I returned to Kunlun City and gave birth to Qingqing for Gu Xingyun. So many years have passed in a flash. Sometimes Gu Xingyun may be right. I'm really a bitch. I'm a fickle woman who likes the new and dislikes the old. I liked Gu Xingyun, but eventually fell in love with Li Guangtu, but I gave birth to a daughter for Gu Xingyun." Her voice gradually became lower. If I could have made different choices at the beginning, it would have been great. Now I have." Li Tianlan said calmly. Li Shi's body trembled slightly, and she didn't speak for a long time. "If you need any help, just tell me." Li Tianlan smiled. "As you just said, you are not my mother, but you are my mother. Although no one is willing to admit this, I am still willing to help you do something." Li Shi was silent for a long time. "I have 2 daughters," she said softly with a trembling voice. "One is by your side, and the other, I hope you can take her out and let her leave Kunlun City. You are His Majesty. You can do it." "Anything else?" Li Tianlan asked. "It's not easy." Li Shi looked at him, and her voice was pleading. Li Tianlan thought of the psychological hint on Li Shi and nodded. "Anything else?" Li Shi shook her head and whispered, "No. After this matter, if you don't mind, leave a place for me in Emperor Dong's palace." Divine Emperor of 9 Heavens. Chapter 925. Li Tianlan could not refuse Li Shi's request, let alone her request. She asked him to bring Li Qingqing back from Kunlun City. She asked for a place in Emperor Dong's palace. Li Shi's recovery period was destined to be long, but the damage to her foundation was not very thorough. She might not be able to return to the peak of the invincible realm in this life, but there was no problem for her to re-enter the invincible realm. Even if she really could not restore her original strength, her vision was still there. As long as she re-entered the invincible realm, she would definitely be an expert who could not be ignored among the experts in the same realm. Such a person joining the Emperor Dong's palace would undoubtedly further enhance the strength of the Emperor Dong's palace. Li Shi knew what he wanted. Li Tianlan knew what Li Shi wanted. Therefore, Emperor Dong's palace could get her help, but it would not restrict her. Li Tianlan could totally afford a leisurely but transcendent position, as long as he could take Li Qingqing away from Kunlun City. There was no room for Li Tianlan to refuse. Even if it was not for the sake of Li Shi, for the sake of Dongqing Rushi, he had to do this. Just as he said to Li Shi. Li Shi was indeed not his mother. But if he married Dongqing Rushi, if Li Shi was not his mother, what was she? He took 2 steps in the room and suddenly said, "How did Kunlun City control Li Qingqing?" "Use poison." Li Shi's voice was a little sad. "That is a kind of poison that suppresses vitality. Qingqing's martial arts talent is actually very good, but under the influence of that poison, it is difficult for her to enter the thunder-shocking realm in this life. I used to know that Gu Xingyun used poison. Now, there should be some spiritual hints. Does she know?" Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes. "Not sure." Li Shi said, "Gu Xingyun will not tell her and I dare not tell her." Suppressing vitality. Li Tianlan muttered to himself. Kunlun City has its own secret laboratory, one of which specializes in studying this toxin. Up to now, this toxin has been very mature and has been updated for many generations. This toxin is widely used in Kunlun City and is commonly used in Phoenix Pavilion. Phoenix Pavilion. Li Tianlan suddenly raised his head. This was also a name that he was extremely familiar with. The first time he heard this name was in East Island, and he heard it from Jianghu. "Tell me about the Phoenix Pavilion." Li Tianlan looked at Li Shi and said slowly, "It's a female organization controlled by Kunlun City. It's responsible for a wide range of areas, including female killers, female spies, female stars, female officials, and female tycoons. Most of them target them with beauty." She frowned and didn't go on, but Li Tianlan had obviously understood what she meant. "How many people does the Phoenix Pavilion have?" Li Tianlan asked. "There are about 600 formal members. Their average age is 23 years old, and their appearance and temperament are the best. They have also been secretly developing for many years. There are the most professional teachers in the Phoenix Pavilion, including etiquette, dance, music, finance, politics, and even bed techniques. In all fields, as long as you want to learn, there will be people to teach you. Almost all the people who come out of the Phoenix Pavilion are mistresses that men dream of. Gu Xingyun uses his own channels to send these young and beautiful women to their targets and give them the life they want. In return, they will use their men to help Kunlun City in some aspects, which is mutually beneficial. For example, you can probably understand the quality of the Phoenix Pavilion. There is now a thunder-shocking realm assassin named Du Hanin in Emperor Dong's palace. She was once targeted by Gu Xingyun and intended to be the target of Phoenix Pavilion. In the evaluation of the Phoenix Pavilion, Du Hanin's evaluation level is A, not only because of her appearance, but also because she has the wind vein. Because she has the wind meridian, she has an extra level. If it's just her appearance, she's probably B+. Li Tianlan was speechless for a while. He naturally knew Du Hanin. She was a beauty, a great beauty. During the period when she was most powerless to protect herself, in order to stay in the Sky Academy, she completely gave up her body, so she also made countless male students in the Sky Academy bleed. Li Tianlan had seen many beautiful women. However, if only in terms of appearance, Du Hanin could definitely be ranked in the top. Such a person was only A in the evaluation of the Phoenix Pavilion? Oh, if only in terms of appearance, it was only B+. He thought about it and asked, "The highest level in the Phoenix Pavilion is A?" "The highest level is X, then S, A, and B. The lowest level is B." Li Shi's voice was calm. Li Tianlan couldn't help laughing. Du Hanin's appearance is only B+? I'm very curious. Who is the X level? What kind of woman can be the X that Gu Xingyun envisioned? Li Shi's voice was still calm. Qin Wei Bai is X. Li Tianlan paused, raised his head, and looked at Li Shi. The room seemed to become silent in an instant. Endless sword energy surged and boiled in absolute silence, completely enveloping Li Shi's body in an instant. Li Tianlan's arm hung down. His palm gradually glowed and became colorful. The incomparably gorgeous luster flowed in his palm, and in the blink of an eye, it turned into a startling scarlet. Li Tianlan looked at Li Shi, expressionless. "I'm willing to respect you, but only if you deserve my respect." Nonsense. Do you want to die? She felt the sword energy around her almost pointing at every vital part of her body. Her eyes subconsciously stared at Li Tianlan's palm. The scarlet light kept shrinking and shrinking. In the light, she felt a kind of pure sword energy full of destruction. Her body trembled instinctively under the huge threat, but her heart and voice were still calm and shocked. Phoenix Pavilion will put every qualified target on the list, but it doesn't mean that they are people of Phoenix Pavilion. If they are on the list, it means that Kunlun City wants to target these people, but it hasn't found a chance. I don't want to anger you, but I can say responsibly that Qin Weibai is indeed on that list, and she is the only X. Although she is not in Phoenix Pavilion, as long as there is a chance, Gu Xingyun will definitely get her to Phoenix Pavilion at all costs. Below the X level is the S level. At present, there are more than 10 people on the S level list in Phoenix Pavilion, but only 3 really belong to Phoenix Pavilion. The first is me, the second is Qingqing, and the third is a girl who joined Phoenix Pavilion a few years ago, named Gu Xianyan. In addition, Wang Yuetong and Nailan Shuring of Beihai, Situ Tsungyue of Sai City, Flaming Fire of Samsara Palace, King Tong of the Rothschild family, Dongqing Rushi of the Dongqing clan. They are all on that list, and they are the targets that Gu Xingyun wants to target. As for the A level, Phoenix Pavilion currently has 30 people, and the candidate list is longer. Tell me who you know. Your secretary Han Xinyan and your sister Dongqing Qiuqi are on the A-level candidate list of Phoenix Pavilion. Li Tianlan laughed. The infinite sword intent slowly converged, and his anger began to fade, but his eyes gradually carried a trace of extremely dangerous and cold aura. This list is authoritative enough. His voice was gentle and soothing. Who gave him the guts to make such a list of candidates? Who gave him the courage? Who? It's just a list. At least so far, Kunlun City hasn't done anything to the people on the list. Li Shi said. Li Tianlan sneered. That was a load of crap. Anyone on the list could be involved in a behemoth, and some even had the peak individual strength, such as Situ Tsungyue and Flaming Fire. However, with the current strength of Kunlun City, Gu Xingyun might not even be a match for Flaming Fire. If they were on the list, Gu Xingyun would at most think about it. If this was his ambition, it would be too wild. However, he dared to make this list, which was already a capital offense in Li Tianlan's eyes. I don't want to provoke you by saying this. You should be very clear that you can kill Gu Qianchuan, but you can't touch Gu Xingyun now. It's not the time yet. You help me bring Qingqing back, and I will do my best to help you destroy Kunlun City little by little. Li Shi whispered. Li Tianlan stood where he was and took a deep breath. All the irritation and ferocity in his heart was suppressed by him. If this is a deal, Li Tianlan said calmly. Deal. The light in the ward slowly fell. Under the light, Li Tianlan's figure became illusory, blurred, false, and finally completely void. Li Shi sat on the bed, motionless. As early as in Mormons, from the moment he stood beside Li Guangtu, she completely betrayed Kunlun City. She entered the Li family from Kunlun City and finally betrayed the Li family. She returned to Kunlun City from the Li family and finally betrayed Kunlun City. Li Shi smiled. At this time, she did not have any burden in her heart, but felt a little ironic. In the past many years, except when she was affected by psychological suggestion, every time Gu Xingyun pressed on her, every time he slapped her, and every insult fell into her ears, she thought of the same thing. One day, she would let Gu Xingyun die a horrible death. She used to love him. But later, she fell in love with Li Guangtu. Her feelings for Gu Xingyun gradually turned into hatred. Naked, crazy, extreme, and hysterical. Her father, who sent her to Kunlun City that year, had left. As long as her daughter could get rid of the poison and return to her side, she would be free. Li Shi trembled and took a deep breath. Her heart was full of comfort. Once again, she clearly smelled the taste of freedom. It was so strange and so beautiful. When Li Tianlan came back, she could probably live for herself for the rest of her life. At this moment, she suddenly thought of her father's words. At that time, Xianxia predicted that the Gu family would rise in Jianghu state and replace the Li family, so he sent her to Kunlun City. But the Gu family did not replace the Li family by the Gu family. In the future that Xianxia saw, the Wang family of Beihai and the Li family would completely fall out. After both sides suffered losses, the Gu family would take advantage of the situation to rise. Gu Qingfeng and Gu Qianquan would enter the invincible realm. Gu Xingyun and Li Shi could reach the peak of the invincible realm. And the next generation, Gu Hanshan, who had the heavenly king heart, also meant an absolutely beautiful future for Kunlun City. Such a lineup was already the top superpower in the dark world. However, all of this had changed the moment she was sent to Li Guangtu's side. What was even more ridiculous was that Kunlun City did not know that it had changed its beautiful future, and embarked on a road that was doomed to be irreversible. Li Shi moved her body, lay on the bed, and closed her eyes. The window seemed to shake for a moment. The space over the entire sanatorium suddenly twisted. A colorful sword light went up against the sky in an instant and went straight into the sky. In the sanatorium, Saint, who was chatting with Han Xinyan, suddenly raised his head. In his sight, the majestic and wanton sword light kept going up. It was like a rainbow crossing the sky. The abundant and sharp sword light illuminated the night sky of Yuzhou City, went farther and farther, and flew straight to the northwest. That was the direction of Kunlun City. You're tuning in to the Wisdom Diary YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.